Yes Win. Written by
嘟嘟雪球
Chapter 61. It is almost impossible for a normal person to run away after being hit by a 5.56mm bullet. What they show in the movies is all lies. Although only one of Chen Chen's 2 bullets grazed the peeper's right leg, it still knocked him to the ground. It took almost no effort, and by alternating their cover, the foursome caught the man in front of the fire. But when he saw the other person's dress, Chen Chen realized that he might have really made a mistake this time. He was a hunter, a serious, ordinary hunter, the most common type in the jungles of northern Myanmar. Yes, he also had a gun, but it was an old-fashioned 5650, and it was not loaded. This thing is considered standard equipment for hunters in northern Myanmar. It is very commonly used to hunt wild boars and the like. Of course, it also clearly expresses the identity of the other party. Chen Chen was almost speechless. Before the other party could speak, he spoke first. Why are you getting so close? Don't you know to stay away and shout first? How the hell do you hunt? How did the old man teach you? Do you want to live or not? The series of questions confused the seemingly young boy on the ground. He was stunned for a long time before finally answering. I was wrong. If it were anywhere else, Chen Chen's words would be suspected of being the first to complain, but it was different here. This was northern Myanmar, where guns were rampant, and in the jungles of northern Myanmar. How dare you walk straight over here? You're really lucky not to be shot dead. What do you do? Chen Chen asked in a grim tone. I live over there in Kantugu. I came here to hunt. I saw the fire over here, so I came over to take a look. I really forgot about it. I'm sorry. I didn't see anything. I really didn't see anything. Just pretend that I haven't been here. Please, I don't want to die. The young man was crying as he spoke. It was obvious that he was frightened by the exaggerated equipment of the 4 people in front of him and the 2 ruthless shots from Chen Chen. Are you here to hunt? You live in Kantugu. Why don't you go back? Chen Chen had a map in his hand. He knew the exact location of Kantugu. It was not too far from where they were now. It was a small village deep in the mountains, and the people there basically made a living by hunting. However, if you were just hunting, there is no need to stay overnight outside. I have no one at home. Sorry, I have a younger sister. My parents died a long time ago, and I've been hunting on my own since I was a child. I don't know the rules. I just wanted to come out and hunt more prey. I didn't catch anything this time. I can't bear to go back. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. He said sorry 3 times in one sentence, which shows that he really knew he was wrong. However, why does this template sound so wrong? Born in a chaotic area, both parents died, mastered a special skill to make a living since childhood, ran into a mercenary while hunting. And he has a sister. What kind of grassroots counterattack protagonist is this? It's just that the roles are reversed. Chen Chen couldn't help but hold his forehead. He has always believed that it is reasonable to meet anyone in this world at any point in time, and the current situation is no exception. This location is not far from Kantugu. If we have a fire, we will be a bigger target. If we encounter while hunting, the chance is extremely small but not zero. Number 4. What should we do? Looking at the trembling boy in front of him, Sure Dakai asked. Let him go. Chen Chen answered casually. After all, they are not in the process of carrying out a mission now, and there is no need for confidentiality. Of course, it is impossible to keep it confidential. When such a large group of people disappeared from Myanmar City, anyone who paid a little attention would know that the Dongfeng Corps had gone out. Therefore, Chen Chen had already informed Peng Shuqing and the 7th Brigade, stating that he was just conducting routine training. Since it is a routine training, there is no need to worry about being seen. If an accident like this happens, just deal with it. After hearing his words, the boy's face immediately showed a look of surprise. He didn't care that his leg was still bleeding, but suddenly turned over and kowtowed to Chen Chen one after another, regardless of the gravel and thorns on the ground. Get up, be careful next time, and wrap your legs before you go. Chen Chen waved his hand, and the latter thanked him repeatedly. Then he sat on the ground and deftly bandaged his thigh, which was grazed by the bullet. The operation used was actually the conventional method used by hunters in the mountains and forests, and there was no visible flaw. A few minutes later, the boy stood up tentatively, said goodbye to the 4 people carefully, and then limped into the depths of the forest. Chen Chen took off the night vision goggles on his head and raised his gun again. This time, he used the TOB grip. Just as the other party was about to walk out of the range of the fire, Chen Chen suddenly asked, why don't you turn on the flashlight? Silence. In this silent moment, only the sound of Chen Chen pulling the trigger could be clearly heard. If you apply a little more force, the trigger will be actually triggered, the hammer will be released, and then within 1,000th of a second, the bullet will be pushed into the barrel by the gunpowder, rotate along the rifling, and then penetrate into the enemy's back. The other 3 also raised their guns. The boy stopped subconsciously. He did not look back, but in a moment that almost caught the other 3 off guard, his shoulders shook suddenly and his body rushed forward quickly. However, Chen Chen had been waiting for this second for a long time. A gunshot rang out, and the bullet pierced the body of the boy who was still in the air. Then, with the help of infrared imaging, Chen Chen used his thumb as a simple sight and fired 3 bullets into the temple of the boy who was still trying to struggle to get up and reload his gun. The forest returned to silence. A bamboo was burned by the bonfire. The other 3 people turned around suddenly. Only Chen Chen stared at the red ball in his sight with cold eyes, waiting for it to slowly turn blue. No other active targets were found around. Number 1, number 2, what about you? Nothing. Number 4, is the person dead? Dead. Chen Chen removed the muzzle of his gun from the ground, quickly scanned the area, and said, Number 1 and number 2, go out and observe and return in 10 minutes. Follow what I taught you. Find the forest paths and set up traps. Use the broadsword. Number 4, get on the tree. Clear. After a series of instructions, Chen Chen picked up the kettle and put out the still burning campfire, eliminating all factors that would affect the investigation. This certainly seems like a sign of panic, but at a time like this, it is never wrong to be too cautious. 10 minutes later, all team members sent back feedback, and there was no one around. Li Bang found the boy's discarded and covered backpack, not far from the place where he fell for the first time. There were no night vision goggles in the bag, but there was a low-light flashlight. There is no doubt that this person is coming for the Dongfeng Corps. What the hell is a hunter? What's the point of having a younger sister at home? What's the protagonist template? How can there be so many protagonists in this world? I'm being targeted. After cleaning up the boy's body, Chen Chen still felt a little regretful. The fact that he could track his own side in the jungle for so long without being discovered shows that this person is indeed a promising talent. If he is trained well, he might become the next jungle soldier king. But he died quietly, without even leaving a name and nothing to prove his identity. The cruelty of northern Myanmar is definitely not only reflected in those horrific horror legends, but more importantly, human life here is really worthless. Who did it? Sure Dakai asked. I don't know. First of all, excluding Chase Li, who has a vested interest, the 7th Brigade and Mugue are both likely to do this. Since they are not sure whether we want to accept Chase Li's mission, it is understandable that they let someone out to monitor us. But this is not in line with their style, so it is more likely that they are mercenaries who have set their sights on the bounty. Including the 3 mentioned before, the intelligence sources are very complex and sufficient. It is not surprising that they can find out about the newcomer Dongfeng Corps and keep vigilant against us. But no matter who it is, the situation is worse than we thought. They actually started preparing now. It seems that the enemy is really not a pushover. Sure enough, the troops that can survive in northern Myanmar are not that simple. They are much more professional than the crappy bandits and deserters and drug dealers we have fought before. Hearing Chen Chen's answer, the other 3 nodded in unison, and Li Bang asked, "What should we do now? Retreat first." After thinking for a few seconds, Chen Chen replied, "No need to retreat. Rest as usual and continue training tomorrow morning." He doesn't have a radio, which means this isn't a combat reconnaissance. His gun isn't loaded, so this isn't an assassination, but just a reconnaissance mission. We're safe until we return. Clear. The bonfire was reignited, but this time, Chen Chen did not give a lecture. Everyone remained alert until daybreak. Of course, the planned training would not be canceled temporarily due to such an emergency. The next day, the 4-member team retrieved the broadswords placed in the jungle, roughly buried the boy's body, and continued on their journey to the target location. It took them 8 hours to successfully reach the target point. After marking it, it took them another day and a half to return smoothly along the evacuation route. Although the training lasted only 3 days, everyone's jungle combat skills improved by leaps and bounds. Especially Chen Chen himself, he could clearly feel that in such a familiar environment, the consciousness in his brain was gradually merging with the instinct in his body. The speed of drawing the gun is faster, TOB aiming is more decisive, and the movements are more precise. Coupled with the improvement in his physical fitness, he is gradually regaining his senses. If he were asked to estimate his progress, it would be 20% when he just finished the Devil's Week, but now, he has at least 50%. Of course, after regaining his feelings, it doesn't mean that he can become the soldier king in his previous life again. Continuous training still needs to continue, but at least this is a platform and a foundation. How do people practice Taoism? Only after building the foundation can one embark on the road to becoming an immortal. Returning to Munka, the first thing Chen Chen did was to find Jackal and ask him to investigate the secret behind this peeper. It only took a few hours for Chen Chen to receive the information. This person was sent by the Piaoing. They issued undisclosed missions to the surrounding villages and recruited a group of people to monitor the movements of several mercenary groups in Munka City. The purpose was to prevent a mercenary group that was stronger than them from taking over our escort mission without their knowledge. In addition to you, Mu Gue was also under surveillance. But Mu Gue was found in the city, and his actions were not as ruthless as yours. According to the current situation, they should have sent out 9 people. The one on your side will die the fastest. Understood. The situation was indeed not much different from what Chen Chen had expected, but the actions of the Piaoing camp also left him a little speechless. Do you really treat human life as nothing? How many people can survive this kind of mission? If you are not discovered today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, how can you not be discovered? As long as you are discovered, who will spare the life of the observer? They also specifically look for villagers in the surrounding area, and they are reluctant to use even their own people. Chen Chen does not believe that they are attracted by the special abilities of those villagers who know nothing, probably just because the price is low. So, how much do they pay per job? Some are higher and some are lower, but most are around 150 a day. US dollars? RMB. Okay. Anyway, we can't hide the news that we killed the spy from the Piaoing, right? We can't hide it, and we don't need to hide it. The news that we are escorting Jia out of the city cannot be kept secret. In addition to this type of surveillance, almost every road out of the city is now monitored around the clock. Don't even mention you. The camp in Chaizili has been set up with surveillance. The barracks where Jia is held are watched by telescopes 24 hours a day. We have caught them 3 times, but we still can't get rid of them. Anyway, we'll find a replacement for you to help you divert the attention. Just do what you need to do. Understood. Chen Chen answered immediately. He wasn't worried about whether the jackals could handle this. Seriously, if they couldn't handle this, then why was he on their ship? This was a minor setback, but it was actually a very normal thing for a mercenary group to encounter. Moreover, the incident wasn't even directed at him. Then there is really nothing to worry about. After a pause, he continued, by the way, help me find a side sight. I need a mechanical side sight. You want to turn your gun into a Christmas tree? I've only seen this kind of modification done by those pretty boys in the United States who play with guns but don't shoot them. Don't worry about it. I want it, or you can replace my current side sight with holographic thermal imaging. but I'll send it to you later. After resolving this small matter, Chen Chen finally breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, just like what Jackal said, all the things he modified were low cost-effective and had extremely low marginal benefits. But it's better to have profit than no profit. It doesn't affect the feel of the gun, and it's not that I can't afford it. Why not change it? If it is really useless, such as laser indicators, I will never add them. After hanging up the phone, Chen Chen turned around and informed others of the situation. Hearing the news that they are not coming specifically for the Dongfeng Corps, everyone's nervous mood relaxed a little. So, we don't need to worry about it anymore? Or will there be similar investigations in the future? Of course there are. It's not just the Piaoying who want to take advantage of the bounty. We should just fight back when the enemy comes. Chen Chen spread his hands and continued, we don't care about them. We should train them when necessary and do artificial intelligence when necessary. The enemy is very impatient and looks very professional, but in fact, they are just imagining something. This is actually good news. As he spoke, he sorted out his equipment and was about to take it off, but at this moment, the simple alarm device installed at the door suddenly sounded. The gun that had just been put down was picked up again in an instant. Through the gap in the window, Chen Chen looked towards the gate of the courtyard. And there, a boy with an unclear face and a somewhat disheveled appearance was knocking on the door. Do you know him? Chen Chen asked in a low voice. I don't know him. After getting the answer, Chen Chen thought for a moment and finally raised his gun and opened the door. After all, this is Mungka, the territory of the 7th Brigade, so there shouldn't be any major problems. Who is it? What are you doing here? He asked. I'm Lin Shan's younger brother. My name is Lin He. My brother is dead, and I'm here to get his gun. Chen Chen's hand tightened on the trigger again. I'm really impressed. Is it true? So, you just want to get that gun back? In the living room, Chen Chen sat opposite the man, or should I say the boy, while the other 3 men never put down their weapons, pointing them directly at the boy's head. In this situation, the boy seemed extremely nervous. His body was even shaking uncontrollably and his voice was trembling a little. But even so, he still expressed his demands very firmly. Yes, I want our guns. They are our own, not trophies. I can give you the gun, but you have to answer my questions first. Can. How did you find us? Chen Chen continued to ask. My brother didn't come back. After dawn, around noon, I followed the signs he left and found your campsite. I saw his grave. Then I followed the path you came from and caught up with you, trying to get the gun back. I saw your car when I got to Wonkong Lane. I guess you were coming to Mungka, so I walked over. I'm not here to cause trouble. My brother has accepted the mission from the Piaoying. We have no grudge against you. I just want the gun. I can't afford a new one. I just want our guns. Panic, but stubborn. Desperate, but awake. Chen Chen was very impressed by this speech, but at the same time, he couldn't let down his guard against the boy immediately. Like that young man, the boy in front of him, Lin He, also lacks the ability to express himself in language. He would repeat the same sentence and express the same meaning over and over again. And this habit is indeed the most common characteristic of the lower-class people in northern Myanmar who have not received much education. This characteristic is completely different from the habit of Chongqing's childcare vehicle drivers who repeat the same sentence 800 times. The root cause of its occurrence is the low comprehension environment. In addition to his loose and old clothes that were probably handed down from the 1980s, his rough face, and the information previously provided by the Jackal, there should be no problem with his identity. The real problem is that he was able to track down his own team after being at least 6 hours behind his own team of 4, and even close the gap within 36 hours? Yes, he was lightly armed, and his team was heavily armed. There are many traces, and the moving speed is slow, which is our shortcoming. But that's a dense forest. Not to mention 6 hours, even without a dog, the distance covered in 1 hour is already an extremely difficult scenario in jungle tracking. How did you catch up with us? I mean, how could you see any traces we left behind? Chen Chen immediately asked. I followed the beast path, and you stepped on the beast path. Yes, you stepped on the animal path and then entered the snake grass, a place no one would touch. I knew it was you at first sight. I followed the animal path and the snake grass to find you. Understood. Chen Chen understood what Lin He meant. His tracking was not based on any jungle anti-tracking law, but purely on the hunter's habit. Hunters don't walk on animal trails, nor do they enter extremely dangerous poisonous bushes and grass. But no matter how professional Chen Chen is, he is not omnipotent, and he did overlook these details. But even so, being able to complete the tracking by relying on such small details definitely requires a top genius. Chen Chen looked a little regretful. Damn it. Damn the Piaoying. If I had known that they were casting a wide net and were not targeting us at all, I really wouldn't have to kill that boy. And if Lin Shan had not died and if he could bring him back, the 2 brothers, one big and one small, could have joined the Dongfeng Corps. Now I have to carry out a mission in the jungle, and I am in need of such talents. Damn you, you idiots from the Piaoying camp. When we really come to blows, I'll beat the shit out of you. Chen Chen sighed, and the expression on his face softened. He signaled the 3 people behind him to put down their guns, and then continued. You can have a gun if you want one. We do have the gun, but it's not that easy to take it back. I can do one thing for you in exchange. Linny's expression remained unchanged. We don't need it. Then do you want money? I don't have any money, but you shouldn't ask for money. He just accepted the mission and the gun is his own. That's enough. Chen Chen waved his hand to interrupt Lin He, and then said, I mean, I can give you the gun, but you have to make sure this ends here. Let's just pretend we never saw each other. Don't retaliate against us, and we won't kill anyone to silence them. How about that? Of course, Chen Chen wanted to accept this powerful ally, but the hatred for the murder of his relatives was too great a destabilizing factor. If the other party had not shown a relatively calm attitude, the person in front of him would have been a corpse by now. I just want the gun. I don't want to seek revenge on you. If I want revenge, I will first seek revenge on the people in the Pyongyang camp. Lin He reiterated. His expression was firm and didn't seem fake. Why? We killed your brother after all. He accepted the mission from the Pyongyang battalion. Lin He continued. The Pyongyang battalion said they would provide a pension, but when I asked before coming here, they refused to give it. That's why I came to you. I really have no other choice. Without the pension, I can't buy a new gun. I just want to ask you if you can give the gun back to me. Give me the gun. It's like you saving my life, and we're even now. That's fair. Can you give me the gun? Okay, you don't have to repeat it. Chen Chen shook his head with a headache and waved his hand for Bao Qi to take the gun to the table. This gun is really old, rusty, and has only 12 rounds of bullets. But Chen Chen knew that it was not an exaggeration at all for Lin He to take such a big risk to come here. For these untouchables and hunters who have no means of making a living, guns are their lives. Without a gun, you will die. Not only in Myanmar, but even in other countries with normal order. Are such things rare? There are old people who hang themselves for a broken sickle, and there are also middle-aged people who kill people for half an acre of land. Because that is their fate. Go ahead and ask. The sufferings in this world are always so shocking. Here's the gun, let's go. I'll give you his bag as well. Carry it on your back. Thanks. Lin He took the thing solemnly, then took 2 steps back and bowed to Chen Chen politely. Chen Chen watched him turn around, and in this moment his thoughts changed many times. The most cold-blooded and heartless self wanted to pull the trigger and kill Lin He from behind. The kindest self wanted to take the other person in and give him a chance to survive. The one in the middle just watched silently and let him leave. Li Bang on the side looked at Chen Chen, then looked at Lin He who was walking towards the gate, his expression somewhat confused. He scratched his head and looked at Shi Dakai beside him. Shi Dakai, on the other hand, made a gesture of spreading his hands towards him. At this moment, Li Bang suddenly felt a surge of sympathy. Or should it be called simple empathy? But he didn't say anything. Because in this situation, in this team, the only person who can speak is Chen Chen. This is the rule. Chen Chen finally let Lin He go, and after he left, the men sitting in the living room began to seriously discuss the right and wrong of letting Lin He go. I personally don't have too many thoughts. First, he is indeed useful to us. Second, he is indeed pitiful. Even if he has a gun, he won't live long. There are no adult men in the family. He will definitely die within half a year. So, I actually advocate keeping him here and giving him a chance to survive. But alas, I won't say it. I'm too subjective. Li Bang scratched his head in annoyance. After a pause, he couldn't help but add, my sister is still in Kokong. Sometimes I really hope someone can help her. Hearing his words, Chen Chen nodded slightly. In fact, in the eyes of many people, Li Bang's idea is ridiculous. What kind of place is this? Northern Myanmar, Shan State. Warlords are fighting each other here. People are living in poverty, and human life is worthless. It's not easy to survive here, but he still has the mind to sympathize with others. But Chen Chen can understand his thoughts very well because from the perspective of professional psychology, this is essentially a kind of psychological compensation. As he said, the families of the Dongfeng Corps members are still trapped in Kokong, and their lives or deaths are unknown. There is no need to even think about their living conditions, which will definitely not be good. At this point in time, if there is such a person who appears, it is absolutely impossible to expect him to remain completely unshakable and to show no human sympathy at all. Just like what is depicted in many war films, soldiers would let the enemy go because of a family photo. This is really not a dramatic interpretation, but the most real human nature. Therefore, Chen Chen did not intend to blame him, but patiently reason with him. I understand what you said, but we can't take too many emotional factors into consideration here. To stay alive, we have to eliminate all risks, and with him, we can't determine the risks. In fact, releasing it is also risky. Shi Dakai interrupted. The best way is to kill him as soon as he walks in the door with a knife, not a gun. The body was dumped outside Minka City. Didn't he say so himself? He has no family. The Pyongyang camp doesn't care. No one will cause trouble. It's a very cold-blooded solution. But as Shi Dakai said, killing people to silence them and eradicating the roots is indeed the least risky solution. But before Chen Chen could open his mouth, Shi Dakai continued. But the question is, who among you can do it? Looked at each other. He really just wanted to live. What was wrong with him? Of course, if things get really desperate and it comes to a life-or-death moment, Chen Chen will definitely take action. No matter who you are, it's a life-and-death battle. In Wan and I's camp, including by Wan Kong's campfire, he did not hesitate for even half a second. But the situation now is completely different. The two sides are not in a life-and-death confrontation for the time being. Although the story of the American army and the shepherds is still vivid in their minds, the situation they faced on the battlefield is different from what they are facing now. The difference is that the U.S. military was facing a life-and-death decision at the time, while our side was facing a difficult-to-balance choice between safety and safer. Should we sacrifice our seemingly worthless humanity in exchange for a little more security? For a moment, Chen Chen couldn't give a 100% correct answer. But he was very sure that he could not do something like Shi Dakai said, killing everyone and dumping the bodies in the wilderness. I can be decisive in killing at any time, but I must never kill innocent people like those cruel local warlords. Even if I want to be a warlord, I have to be a new warlord who abides by the rules, rather than a bandit who doesn't eat beef. So what? So we should lock him up and deal with him after the mission is over? Bao Qi asked. After thinking for a moment, Shi Dakai replied, whether to lock him up or let him go actually depends on one thing. How deep is his hatred for us? The most important thing is that he said he had no grudge against us, but I find it hard to believe that. Don't worry too much about this. Chen Chen interrupted and said, like he said just now, the key to his brother's death was not us, but the Pyongyang camp. Secondly, we gave him the gun, so we are even. The biggest concern is that he has seen us and tracked us, so he might expose our combat methods. Chen Chen scratched his head and continued. The phrase blood debt must be paid with blood certainly exists in northern Myanmar, but it only applies to vendettas. Mercenaries do not seek revenge. This is a basic rule and the basis for the existence of the mercenary system here. If you wantonly seek revenge, you are not a mercenary. You are a gangster. Really? As soon as Chen Chen said this, the others nodded immediately. In fact, they had lived for so long and had never seen any mercenary's family seek revenge on their opponents. So, can we draw a conclusion? Bao Qi asked. In this corps, discussions can be held at any time and everyone can speak freely, but only one person can come to a conclusion, and once a conclusion is reached, it cannot be questioned. So, Chen Chen nodded solemnly and said, we can draw a conclusion now. We did nothing wrong in letting him go. It's not a 100% risk-free option, but it's the best option we can make. I don't want our army to completely destroy humanity and turn into a group of shuras who kill without blinking an eye, because we want to do big things, and if we want to do big things, we must have a basic bottom line. The way this incident was handled should also become the principle for us to handle similar incidents in the future. Is that clear? Clear. The three of them answered together with determined expressions. Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He had never imagined that a routine reconnaissance by the enemy would bring about such a question of conscience for his side. But fortunately, the Dongfeng Corps passed this hurdle. The people's hearts are still united. And Chen Chen has a vague feeling that this young man named Lin, he may have intersections with the Dongfeng Corps. Exactly when it happened is unknown. This small setback did not affect the subsequent plans of the Dongfeng Corps. In the next few days, Chen Chen mainly did several things. The first step is to further eliminate the threat of Linha. In the subsequent training, the Dongfeng Corps went to Kantuga village in person, confirmed the situation at Lin He's home, confirmed the authenticity of all his background, and used the relationship with the management committee to register him in the public security brigade. From now on, if he wants to join any mercenary group and gain more powerful strength to retaliate against the Dongfeng Corps, Chen Chen will know it first. Secondly, he obtained information about the three main opponents according to the original plan: Guerrilla, Piaoying, and Lion Corps. Among them, the Lion Corps is the strongest, with a complete range of light and heavy weapons, the highest quality personnel, expertise in offensive operations, and the highest degree of specialization. The Ga Yaozi group has the worst equipment, but has the largest number of people, over 100. They mainly use light weapons, have a small number of heavy weapons and explosives, and have basically no electronic capabilities. The Piaoying is a team that is in the process of transforming from a mercenary group to a PMC. Their leader was originally a member of the Wood Ghost Elite team. After setting up their own team, they've been seeking to transform into a professional one. However, just as Chen Chen judged, they're still at the stage to try to draw a tiger, but end up with a dog instead of a tiger. In general, the Lion Corps is the most difficult to deal with, and the Puppet Battalion has the biggest flaws. But no matter which team it is actually a powerful team that is not easy to deal with. Therefore, Chen Chen formulated different combat plans for these three teams, and even planned different battlefields. If a conflict really happens, he will follow the plan and defeat the three teams one by one. Finally, the Dongfeng Corps completed an ultra-long-distance jungle terrain march from Wanpangsang to the suburbs of Mengbin, during which they also completed training on the use of new equipment. Of course, they also determined the route of action, and set up more than 40 traps and placed 20 supplies including medicines and food along the route using special standards that only they could identify. All the broadsword mines have been used, not a single one left. Everything was ready, and there was nearly a month left before the deadline set by the Jackal to complete the mission. But Chen Chen didn't plan to wait any longer. As you prepare, the enemy is also preparing. Never wait until both parties have completed 100% before hedging openly. If your side has completed 80% and the enemy has only completed 40%, then your chance of winning is doubled. That's enough. Let's fight. How is the cargo's physical condition? In the Chai Zili camp, Chen Chen, who was already fully armed, asked. According to your request, I gained 10 kilograms in 1 month and completed basic physical training. Overall, she is in good physical condition and is capable of a relatively high-intensity trek. But I have to say that it's impossible to expect her to perform amazingly in the subsequent jungle cross-country race. She simply doesn't have that kind of quality. The most likely scenario is that you will need to carry her on your back for most of the trip, which will be a hassle for you. We didn't plan on carrying her. Chen Chen interrupted Jackal's words and continued. We will find another way. Now, take me to see her. Okay, I believe you. The Jackal did not ask any more questions, but took Chen Chen straight to the room where Jiao was imprisoned, or rather, under house arrest. More than 2 months later, Chen Chen saw this woman again, and to his surprise, she looked even better than the last time he saw her. Even her face was smiling. Hello, Mr. Rek. Jiao went up to greet them enthusiastically, seemingly having no idea what her future would be like. Chen Chen shook her hand expressionlessly, and before he could speak, Jiao continued. I heard from Mr. Jackal that the scheduled departure date is 1 month later, but it seems that plans cannot keep up with changes, which surprised me. Nothing on the battlefield goes strictly according to plan, especially not according to a public plan. The absence of a plan is the plan itself. Chen Chen's tone was calm, which obviously gave Jia a lot of confidence. She took a long breath and replied, You are a professional, and I will follow your instructions. During this period of time, I have gained weight and exercised according to Mr. Jackal's requirements. Now my physical fitness is very good. I think I will not be a drag on you. Of course, if something really goes wrong, I hope you can save me as much as possible for the sake of the contract. Don't worry, I will strictly ensure that you stay alive. Chen Chen spoke again. Hearing this, Jia smiled brightly, while the jackal beside him had a strange expression on his face. But of course, he would never say anything that would be detrimental to the mission in front of Jia. Then pack your things and leave in half an hour. You have to remember one thing. During this operation, you must trust my orders without reservation. Even if I ask you to throw yourself at the gunpoint, I am saving your life. Do you understand? Clear. Jia nodded seriously. It seemed that the jackal had trained her quite well. Of course, it could also be that Hino's bandits were well trained. But Chen Chen didn't care about this. What he cared about was only the details of the next task execution. Put on her body armor. Is the rest of the team ready? He addressed this question to the jackal, who immediately replied. There are 3 vehicles in total, 3 teams, and everything is ready. They will set out at the same time as you, leaving the city from 3 directions. In theory, they will buy you a window of about 20 minutes, but the route to Wonkong Nome cannot be faked, so you can only rush through it. According to previous investigations, there are 2 sentry posts along the Wangkangnong route, guarded by Ga Yaozi and Piaoying respectively. Each sentry post has about 10 people, and each has a heavy machine gun. Ga Luojia's sentry post is on the bridge. You can bypass it by crossing the river from the shallows, but you can't bypass the sentry post of the Piaoying. In addition, the temporary camp of the Piao Battalion is set up near the outpost, and their support speed will be very fast. Understood. What about the Lion Army? Where are they now? Chen Chen continued to ask. As reported earlier, the main force is still near the Mingyang Highway, but they are very mobile. After the scouts in Mungka City discovered the abnormality, they were able to rush to the battlefield within 10 minutes, and it only took 20 minutes for the follow-up support to arrive. So before you reach Wanpang Sang and enter the jungle, the main risk of pursuit comes from the Lion Army. Clear. Chen Chen nodded again. It's good to have a big team. The intelligence that might have taken the 4 members of the Dongfeng Corps days, or even weeks to master, has now been fully shared with our side. This is undoubtedly a huge advantage for the implementation of specific combat plans. It was precisely this information obtained from the preliminary reconnaissance that made him give up his plan to rush through the main road. If he didn't know that someone was watching the camp in Chaizili 24 hours a day, if he didn't know that the road had been controlled, if he didn't know that the Piaoying Battalion had even set up a temporary camp, he would have died without knowing how he had rushed in. After confirming that the basic information remained unchanged, Chen Chen returned to his team. Everyone is already equipped and is making final preparations for their equipment. Since the lethality of explosives such as grenades will be greatly reduced in the jungle, everyone carried only a few grenades this time, 2 offensive and 2 defensive ones, and the remaining hanging points all carried smoke bombs. The main weapons remain unchanged, but Bao Qi and Shi Dakai's guns are equipped with grenade launchers. Bao Qi's PKMS is a must-have. In special circumstances, it can be used as an obstacle breaker. Only Shi Dakai carried an SVD. Currently, Chen Chen's 416 Hong Kong dollars already had a 4x sight and special bullets, and its medium and short-range killing capabilities were sufficient, so no additional supplements were needed. Therefore, he still chose to bring CS/LS2 as an additional weapon. Are you all ready? Ready. Several people answered in a low voice. Check the watch and communications. 21:23. Communication check completed. Normal. Get ready to go and receive the goods. Clear. After the order was given, the 4-member team immediately set off for the indoor parking lot that had been built a few days ago and prepared to board the car. At the same time, the jackal had already brought over the prepared Jia. She was wearing a lightweight bulletproof vest without a bulletproof plate, a helmet and night vision goggles on her head. Her hair had been cut, and her other equipment was exactly the same as the 4-man team of the Dongfeng Corps. She even held a Type 81 rifle in her hand that had been prepared long ago. At first glance, there is really no difference between male and female, and it is impossible to tell that she is the target of this escort. Where's the gag? Where's the mask? Chen Chen asked. Wear it now? The jackal asked subconsciously, holding a pure black gag in his hand. Wear it now. From now on, you can only listen, not speak. Do you understand? Jia on the side opened her mouth subconsciously, but finally swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth and just nodded. The jackal swiftly put the gag on her. This thing cannot completely restrict vocalization, but it can effectively control the movement of the tongue and facial muscles. In most cases, it plays the role of preventing screaming. Accidents may happen at any time, and if the sound is reduced by a dozen decibels, it may be possible to get an extra chance of survival. Seeing that Jia was fully equipped, the 4 of them looked at each other and put on their masks at the same time. The mission begins. Jackal, you're number 0. Cut off the communication with Mungka City, and let's go. The warrior vehicle started up with a roar, and in the distance, several cables maintaining the power supply of cellular communication base stations were cut off, and the backup energy batteries in the computer room were destroyed. At 9:50, all mobile communications near Mungka City were interrupted. 4 vehicles roared out of the Chaizili camp. For the Dongfeng Corps, this life-threatening mission officially began. The enemy has not yet discovered the disruption of mobile communications. Groups 1, 2, and 3 have already set off. Group 1 has arrived near the Wanmishan Monastery and is waiting. Group 2 arrived at Maha Monastery. Group 3 arrived at the Nanluo Bridge and has not encountered any interception yet. Number 4. How's the situation over there? The warrior car sped westward. Mungka was extremely quiet at midnight. Chen Chen didn't know how many people were staring at him, but he knew that these people would never dare to fire their guns before he left the city. It's still safe for now, but that doesn't mean he can let his guard down. We have arrived near the government hospital and are expected to reach the former Puai commercial bank location in 3 minutes. Understood. Countdown 3 minutes. The bait will start leaving the city. There are many key steps in this operation, but the most important thing now is to ensure that all 4 vehicle crews leave the city at the same time. Only in this way can the bait group divert the enemy's attention to the greatest extent and create a window of opportunity for the Dongfeng Corps to capture the city. Chen Chen glanced at his watch and answered, I will start leaving the city in 4 minutes. I need to enter the farmland road here, so the speed is expected to slow down. Understood. We will start leaving the city in 220 seconds. I cannot create conflict here. The inspection time will be delayed by 20 minutes at most. Within 20 minutes, you have to cross the Mekong River. After crossing the Mekong River, you have 20 minutes to clear 2 checkpoints. Receive. After the simple reply, the warrior's car fell silent again. Sitting in the middle of the back row, Jia looked around in fear. The confident state she had before departure was no longer there. Instead, she was filled with nervousness that made her heart beat wildly and even twitch to the point of feeling nauseous. After all, this was her first time experiencing such a real battlefield. That's right, she had been trapped in Wan Hinai's camp for a long time and witnessed all kinds of cruel things. Even when she was rescued by the Dongfeng Corps, she witnessed with her own eyes a living person having his head opened in front of her. But it was different, it was all over then. And now, the action that determines her own destiny has just begun. People often have a sudden realization when they reach the end, but they worry about gains and losses in the process. This sentence is the most appropriate to describe her. Her hand was tightly gripping the Type 81 rifle, but in fact, there was no bullet in the gun. What's the use? Her life actually depended on the 4 people in the car. She looked at the man in the front row, codenamed Shipwreck, and subconsciously wanted to speak, only to find that the gag had restrained her muscles, and it was not that easy to speak. No wonder he put the gag on himself. It turned out that he really couldn't help it. Jia ya vimpede din herturuat. Chen Chen frowned and said softly, Quiet. Keep as quiet as possible. When we get to the sentry post later, if we can get through, we will just get through. But if a fight breaks out, remember, lie down in the car, under the seat, and don't move. Jia nodded vigorously, and at this time, Shur Dekai, who had been timing on the side, spoke. 30 seconds left to pass Puai Commercial Bank. Number 0, countdown to 90 seconds, start. Number 0 received. The Jackal's reply came back smoothly. The enhanced 10-kilometer radio they were using could support 10 kilometers of communication transmission under ideal conditions. In the event of a cellular mobile communication interruption, this was their only means of staying in touch. It was also a huge advantage over other enemies whose radios had shorter transmission distances or even no radios at all. The warrior car drove past Puai Commercial Bank and entered the narrow farmland road. Just as Chen Chen expected, the speed of the car slowed down instantly. When the 60-second countdown ended, 3 bait vehicles in the north, east, and south of Myanmar City started immediately and rushed towards the checkpoints on these 3 routes in the most conspicuous and ferocious state. Number 4, bait in the water, prepare to cross the river. Understood, prepare to cross the river. Chen Chen gave an order, and the shallows along the planned route appeared in front of them. Li Bang slammed the steering wheel, and the warrior made a sharp left turn and rushed down the roadbed, making a huge roar, roaring over the already dried paddy fields and rushing straight towards the Mekong River. The Dongfeng Corps has already conducted preliminary surveys of this shoal, and the warrior vehicle will have no problem rushing across it at maximum load. However, if the car really got stuck, the only option would be to abandon the car and cross the river on foot, then follow Route 2 to Wangsingping village to seize the car and run away. Fortunately, the water that just covered the tires did not block the warrior's way forward. It only took 30 seconds for the car to reach the west bank of the Mekong River. At the same time, gunshots finally came from behind. It was not dense, but just a few bursts of fire. This was a warning shot, not an engagement. Number 4, all decoys have been engaged. We need to stop the car. We will try to delay the time as much as possible. You have at least 20 minutes. The Lion Corps scouts in the city are moving towards the Nanluo Bridge. They made a misjudgment. This is good news. Apparently, the Lion Corps mistakenly thought that the escort team was going to break through the checkpoint from the south, taking the Jingdomingbin route. They probably didn't expect that the Dongfeng Corps would actually go into the jungle. I see. What about the other 2 corps? Ga Yaozi has not made any movement for the time being. Their communications have been interrupted, and the command is not smooth. There has been a mobilization at the temporary camp of the Piaoying. A team of 5 people is heading to the Wamishan Monastery in the north. Also, there are several cars in the city leaving the city, and one of them is catching up with you, 6 minutes behind. They are from the small army. It's up to you to decide whether to destroy them or not. At this time, the warrior car had returned to the field road on the west side, and the speed was increased again. The checkpoint at Ga Yaozi has been bypassed, and it is still 6 minutes away from the checkpoint at Piaoying. According to the 20 minutes given by the Jackal, the Dongfeng mercenary group was at least 26 minutes ahead of all enemies in the city. After thinking for a moment, Chen Chen made a decisive decision. Stop the car, wait for them to cross the river. The following car must have guessed, or at least thought they had guessed, the true target location. Keeping them alive is a risk. We must take advantage of the window of communication interruption to kill them to avoid affecting subsequent checkpoints. The warrior vehicle braked suddenly and stopped behind the bushes beside the farmland. Then, Chen Chen pushed open the door and got out, while Bao Qi turned over and stood behind the 85 heavy machine gun. The muzzle of the gun was pointed at the shallows, and lights appeared from the original location of Puai Trading Company. Chen Chen took out 2 new 40 machine guns from the space under the machine gun and handed them to Shur Dekai, who got off the car at the same time. A Hilux rushed down the river beach following the warrior's tire tracks, and 2 40mm guns loaded with high explosive bombs locked onto it. The distance is 100 meters. 3, 2, 1, fire. 2 rockets flew out of the chamber. The flight speed is 295 meters per second, and there is no tortuous trajectory like in the movies. Almost at the moment the barrel fired, Hilux exploded on the spot. A huge roar was heard, and the river water splashed up and fell down like rain. Get in the car and head to the checkpoint at full speed. The key to whether the 4-member Dongfeng Corps can pass the checkpoint is not how perfect their disguise is or how natural their performance is. Because no matter how perfect the disguise is, it cannot withstand infinite suspicion. There was only one chance for them to get away with it, and that was that the mercenaries in the Piaoying battalion at the checkpoint were completely attracted by the gunfire in the distance and relaxed their inspection of passing vehicles. At 10 o'clock, there are not many cars entering and leaving Minka via the Wangkingnong route, but it is definitely not a few. Theoretically speaking, the Dongfeng Corps has a chance. But unfortunately, their luck was not good. After the warrior car turned onto the main road, it took 5 minutes to reach the road corner 600 meters away from the checkpoint. Chen Chen ordered the car to stop for a simple observation, and through the telescope, they saw the scene they least wanted to see. There were nearly 10 people scattered around the checkpoint, and they were conducting a detailed inspection of a passing car. Obviously, there's no way around it. Since it's impossible to get away with it, there's no point in even trying. Be prepared to force your way through the checkpoint. Chen Chen gave the order decisively. Number 2, use the heavy machine gun to fire at the pickup truck on the left. There are 4 enemies inside. Make sure they're all killed. Number 3, use 40 fire to destroy the machine gun pickup on the right. Number 1, advance to 150 meters and use smoke bombs to block the enemy's firing range. Everyone turn on thermal imaging and be careful not to block my shooting range. You are only responsible for covering and blocking the enemy's escape route. I will do all the killing. Clear. The 3 of them answered at the same time. And then Chen Chen turned to Ga Yaozi and said, lie down in the car, don't move, and don't run, understand? Ga Yaozi nodded frantically, whimpering in her throat. Chen Chen suddenly clenched his fist. Li Bang stepped on the accelerator, and the warrior rushed out. A distance of 400 meters only takes 30 seconds at full speed. 200 meters away from the checkpoint, the warrior brakes suddenly and stopped with the front of the car facing the middle of the road. At this time, everyone could clearly see the enemy's distribution and firepower at the checkpoint. Without any pause, all 4 doors opened within 1 second. Then, Baoqi rolled over and climbed into the back seat. He turned the machine gun and fired fiercely at the left side of the pickup truck. At the same time, Shirdekai released the safety of the 40 fire, and a rocket hit the right machine gun pickup directly, and flames shot up into the sky. The shock wave of the explosion knocked 2 nearby enemies to the ground, and the roar of the heavy machine gun made everyone fall down subconsciously. The 12.7mm bullets almost tore the pickup truck apart, and the 4 enemies on it had almost no time to react before they were shattered into a pile of debris. Blood and flesh spurted onto the shattered windshield, creating a horrifying blood-red stain. Afterwards, Baoqi adjusted the muzzle of his gun and began to suppress the enemies on the left side of the road who were not affected by the explosion with long bursts of fire. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Chen had advanced to about 150 meters away from the enemy. He crouched and aimed his gun at the 2 fallen enemies on the far left side of the road. This time, he did not use the optical sight. The newly installed mechanical side sight worked for the first time. He tilted the gun, fired 2 short bursts, 6 bullets, and the 2 enemies fell to the ground dead. At this time, the smoke bombs thrown by Li Bang during the march had exploded about 30 meters in front of the enemy. 3 smoke bombs blocked all vision. With the help of thermal imaging, the battlefield immediately became a one-sided harvest. Jia covered her ears with her hands in fear. At this moment, she finally realized that the real battlefield was completely different from what she had imagined. The violent and continuous gunfire, the deafening explosions, the shrill screams coming from afar, and the piercing and somewhat eerie buzzing sound from the radio made her whole body tremble, and she huddled in the gap in front of the back seat of the warrior car, not daring to move at all. She is very scared. She was afraid that a stray bullet would fly over and take her life. But what can I do if I'm afraid? I really can't resist. Even the bulletproof vests I was wearing were just soft bulletproof vests. I heard that this kind of bulletproof vest could not stop rifle bullets at all. Yes, there were only 10 people on the other side, and there were 4 people on my side. There was no suspense in defeating them, but the question was, could they really protect themselves? It was not certain. Otherwise, run? Once this thought arose, I could no longer suppress it. She silently made up her mind not to stay in the car any longer because the target was too obvious. Count down 1 minute. If the battle is not over yet, you must get out of the car and hide behind the rocks on the side of the road. At least I'm relatively safe there. 60, 59, 58, Jaya counted silently in her heart. Her heartbeat was getting faster and faster, almost breaking through the limit, but at this moment, the car door was suddenly opened again. Her heart almost stopped because her first reaction was that the other party called her, but she didn't. The ones who got on the bus were number 2 and number 3. They lifted themselves from the gap and resettled themselves in their seats. Soon after, number 1 and number 4 also appeared in the front seat. Go ahead and leave the bodies alone. Number 4, or a sinking ship, whispered. The vehicle started. Jia struggled to look forward, and after passing through the smoke, all that appeared before her was dead silence. She clearly remembered that it was 10:04 when the 4 people got off the bus, and now it is 10:05. Hayu Camp, a temporary camp located near Ban, the Myanmar Nong Temple. The current leader of the Piaoying Mercenary group, the genuine Burmese man, Go Danwai, stared at the fire in the distance in amazement. For a moment, he couldn't even believe what was happening right under his nose. The cars on the northeast, south, and north sides are all fake, but the car on the west side is real. He was very sure that the target woman was in the car, and everything would be over if he killed her. A $200,000 reward? No, that's just Ming Pao. In fact, the total amount of rewards for all secret reports is as high as 1.2 million. With this money, his own cavalry regiment could quickly move to a higher level and even have a chance to truly gain the support of Muguay and the 7th Brigade. But the problem is that the woman must die. And if that woman is to die, the team escorting her must die. Ga Yaozi had already figured out that the group responsible for the escort was the new regiment that had recently gained fame, the Dongfeng Corps. They defeated Wanhanai and Puai Trading Company, and their fighting power was indeed very strong. But it can't be that strong, right? 10 people, 30 seconds, and they're gone. Ga Yaozi's hands were shaking. He yelled to his adjutant, "Call everyone back. To the west. They're going to Wonkong. Catch them. Don't let them get away. Damn it. Drive and find a radio signal. Contact them quickly." There were still nearly 30 people in the camp, and the rest were scattered outside. 30 people against 4 people. This should have been a winnable battle. But for some reason, Ga Yaozi just felt unsure. He raised the telescope again, and this time, he saw a scene that horrified him. The off-road vehicle was heading towards the camp. Not only did they not plan to run away, they even planned to attack actively. Is this really an escort? Everyone gather. They are coming. Prepare to meet the enemy. Prepare to meet the enemy. Number 0. We have passed the checkpoint. What is the situation on all sides now? In the warrior car, Chen Chen asked the jackal calmly. The enemy at the Ga Yaozi checkpoint also made a miscalculation. They retreated back to Mungka City via the bridge and found a radio signal inside the city. Now, they have just turned around and are heading towards Wangsingping village. You chose the wrong route. They are still at least 8 minutes away from the Piaoying checkpoint, and you are still 8 minutes ahead of them. The other 3 baits can't hold on any longer. The Lion Corps is already heading west. You are about 15 minutes ahead of the Lion Corps. As for the Piaoying camp, are you going to destroy their camp? Yes, I will destroy their camp. Chen Chen answered immediately without hiding his intentions. Even the jackal was subconsciously stunned when he heard his answer. But he also knew that number 4 was the real frontline commander, and he had no say in operational decisions. Therefore, he could only quickly report the situation to Chen Chen. The enemies in the Piao camp are gathering and are currently converging towards the square on the west side of the camp. They may want to do a short pre-war mobilization first. I don't know how long it will take. However, you are still about 2,200 meters away from the Piaoying camp. The road conditions are not good. It will take at least 5 minutes to arrive. They should be able to complete the deployment. There are a lot of heavy weapons and explosives in the camp, so a frontal attack is difficult. Understood. Chen Chen interrupted Jackal's words, then checked the map and gave orders to Li Bang. After about a kilometer, we stopped at the first U-bend in the road and launched the artillery fire from there. Step on the gas. We'll be there in a minute. Clear. Li Bang answered without hesitation, but Jackal called out directly. Bombardment? What bombardment? What are you talking about? Mortar? You want to hit the reverse slope? Chen Chen did not answer or explain, but simply said, Number 0, shut up. Do your job well. The Jackal instantly realized his gaffe and turned back into his professional self. I see the U-bend you mentioned. The straight line distance is 1,100 meters. The slope is 35 meters high, and the height difference between the launch position and the impact point is 5 meters. Do you need me to give you a rough estimate of the shooting parameters? In fact, calculating the shooting parameters is a very complicated task. People who have not been trained may not even be able to understand the abacus on the base. When Chen Chen was learning about distance divisions, secant, temperature, sine, cosine, tangent, and small angles, he was also completely confused. After a long struggle, the first shot missed the target by a long distance. The squad leader came over and saw that the tangent and sine were calculated incorrectly. But now, the difficulty is not only in solving the various elements, but also in the non-visual reverse slope bombardment. In this situation, adjustments must be made through the cooperation of the observer and the gunner. In many cases, a small deviation will lead to a huge inaccuracy. But Chen Chen still didn't plan to rely on the Jackal, because he was really just talking by looking at the pictures, and the help he brought was almost negligible. So he immediately replied, I don't need you to provide the calculation. Do you have a drone in the sky? Report the impact point to me. No drones. What use is there for you? Chen Chen pouted and immediately said to Shirdakai. Number 3, get off the car and go uphill immediately after reaching the designated location. Report the direction to me, and use the telescope to observe the impact point. Number 2, help me unload the gun after you get off the car. Number 1, you are responsible for installing the base. Clear. The 3 of them answered in unison. In previous training, the Eastern Corps had actually conducted several artillery coordination training exercises. Although no live ammunition was fired, each of the 4 was very familiar with the process. Even if they were forced to do something, it was basically enough. Anyway, they were not asked to be artillerymen, but just to dig pits, fill soil, and install artillery. Moreover, Chen Chen was not pursuing precise killing, but to defeat the Hussars with a round of artillery fire and scare them away. At this time, with Li Bang stepping on the accelerator without hesitation, the warrior car had roared out a distance of 1 kilometer. The U-shaped bend was right in front of him, and there was another sudden break. Chen Chen almost opened the door and jumped out of the car by inertia. Then he ran up the mountain quickly and conducted a rapid visual reconnaissance of the Piaoying camp 1 kilometer away with Shirdakai. The role of the laser rangefinder telescope was clearly revealed at this moment. Although it was not known at that time that the Dongfeng Corps would have artillery, it now seems that the money was not wasted. It took him only 30 seconds to determine the exact location, and when he returned, Bao Qi and Li Bang had already set up the cannon as required by the training and were prying open the box of shells. At this time, 2.5 minutes had passed since the mercenaries began to gather in the camp. Chen Chen only has 1 minute at most to solve all the variables. Temperature. Ignore. Quickly complete the distance scale adjustment in 10 seconds. Complete the direction adjustment in 10 seconds. Find the fifth circle on the calculation disk, check the gun elevation correction chart, and correct the shooting distance density. 10 seconds. He took the shell handed to him by Li Bang and loaded it into the barrel. Flutter. With a dull sound, the first shell flew in a parabola towards the direction of the Piaoying camp. At this time, in the temporary camp of the Piaoying camp, Ga Yaozi yelled impatiently at the mercenaries in the camp, urging them to quickly prepare their weapons and find their positions. He didn't know why he was so nervous, but he had a bad feeling in his heart. Although there are only 4 people on the opposite side, this battle will not be easy. Fortunately, the Piaoying are not vegetarians. After their own training and experience in actual combat, this team has long since transformed from an ordinary mercenary team of low quality to a professional armed force. It took less than 2 minutes for everyone to gather on the west side of the camp. After a simple briefing, they quickly dispersed. They already had weapons in their hands. If the 4 people on the opposite side really dared to rush over without thinking, the Piaoying would definitely let them know what professionalism really meant. But did they go get it? After turning the corner of Wangkangnan Country Road, they disappeared from my sight. Their position was blocked by the small slope, but theoretically, based on their speed of travel, they should have turned around by now. Confused, Ga Yaozi raised the telescope again, but he still saw nothing. But at this moment, a strange whistling sound suddenly came to his ears. Immediately afterwards, there was a deafening explosion. He turned back in horror and saw the smoke raised by the explosion not far from the northwest corner of the camp. Artillery fire is artillery fire? Ga Yaozi had no time to react. Less than 10 seconds later, the second artillery fire arrived. No, it should be said that it was not the second shot, but the second round. Within just 15 seconds, 4 shells fell one after another, and almost all of them landed accurately on the square on the west side. And there were more than 20 mercenaries who had not had time to disperse. Ga Yaozi's eyes were bloodshot. Hide! Hide! Bombard! There are more than 4 of them. They have an artillery battalion. However, at this time, no one listened to him anymore. After 4 shells fell, a few seconds later, the third round of 5 shells fell. The west square of the camp was almost razed to the ground. There were corpses everywhere. Rapid fire. You fired a round of mortar rapid fire by yourself. Over the radio, the Jackal's voice was almost hoarse. Routine operations are already slow enough. Chen Chen answered casually and then continued. Pack your things and get in the car. We are 4 minutes ahead of Jialuoya. Don't let them catch us. Are you kidding? The camp of the Piaoying is finished. On the speeding Hilux, the captain of the guerrilla corps asked in disbelief. Yes, we just contacted the Piao battalion via radio. They were hit by a round of artillery fire. More than a dozen people died and 7 or 8 were injured. The camp has basically been emptied. Now the rest of them scattered in Mungka City are rushing back, but I dare say it's no use. They have already lost this battle. I estimate that the entire corps will be dispersed. We can't do anything. The enemy is a large army. I heard that they fired dozens of shells within a minute. They had no time to react. Hearing the words of the adjutant beside him, the team leader couldn't help but gasp. Dozens of shells per minute. What kind of firepower density is this? Ga Yaozi also has artillery, several Type 60 mortars, and an M56 105mm howitzer. But even if all of them are deployed, it is impossible to fire at such a density. 20 rounds per minute. This is probably the limit. Who is the opponent? Didn't Chisley agree that he would not fight in person? But looking at the current situation, it seems that apart from them, only Muguay and the 7th Brigade can barely fight at this level. He looked at the road that was constantly retreating in confusion. At this moment, he even hesitated whether to continue the pursuit. However, this was not the end. The adjutant continued to speak on his own. And most importantly, from beginning to end, the Piaoying battalion did not find the enemy's artillery position. They speculated that the enemy might have used a mortar battalion to attack the reverse slope, with at least 6 mortars. They only fired 2 rounds and then withdrew. They completed the calibration with just 1 shot. Their strength is terrifying. Where is Ga Yaozi? Is Ga Yaozi dead? The team leader asked immediately. He didn't die. His leg was pierced by shrapnel. He was lucky because those people used high explosive bombs, not anti-personnel bombs. But I don't think he can make it. I heard that he penetrated the aorta. If it's not treated properly, he would be dead by now. Ga Yaozi is disappointed? Forget about him. The captain is also disappointed. Is this a war between mercenaries? For vehicles leave the city, 3 baits. All communications were cut, and the team without radios was simply blinded. We intercepted the pursuing pickup truck on the riverbank and accurately killed it with 2 40mm rounds. They forced their way through the checkpoint set up by the Piao camp, and it is said that the mercenaries guarding the checkpoint didn't even have a chance to fire their guns. After the fight, they did not run away, and even rushed over to bombard the temporary camp of the Piaoying, and seized the opportunity when the other party was gathering urgently. The clarity of the other party's intelligence, decisiveness in decision-making, resoluteness in action, and strong combat power were all unprecedented. No, if you have to say Muguay can also achieve such results, but it is absolutely impossible to rely on 4 people. The captain hesitated even more. If I chase him, I might get killed. If I don't chase him, the leader won't forgive me. His brows were almost twisted into knots. After hesitating for a long time, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go, or we have to chase. They can't continue the ambush. Our people and the Lion Corps are all heading this way. We just need to bite them and hold them back. Everyone, get your RPGs ready. Shoot at anyone you see. Shoot at the road. As long as we slow them down, we'll win." Chen Chen didn't know what the pursuers were thinking, but he knew that the Pyongyang camp probably didn't have the ability to attack again. In fact, in his opinion, a round of 10 rapid fire was not a shocking operation at all. Not to mention the troops in his previous life. The regular armies of most countries in the world could perform at this level. The Americans, who were proficient in individual mortar combat, once used the M224 to fire an astonishing record of 45 rounds per minute, an average of 1 round every 1.5 seconds, which is several times faster than their own average of 6 seconds per round. But of course, it wasn't because he was slow. In fact, he found that he could perform the action of maneuvering a cannon very well, which required high experience, awareness, and knowledge, but low physical instinct. The reason why we can't play at a very fast speed is that the team is not good enough. But coming back to the point, if you're fighting a mercenary group, one shot every 6 seconds is enough. Those mercenaries from the Pyongyang camp who had gathered in the West Square to listen to orders and had no time to disperse were almost all wiped out. The few who ran away and returned from Myanmar City could only be busy treating the wounded and guarding the camp. Don't even think about catching up, just take care of yourself first. Number 0, we have left the artillery position, reporting the situation. Number 4, you are out of our surveillance range. We can't see the situation on your side. Ga Yaozi's sentinels are still in pursuit and have already passed Wangsingping village. The Lion Corps has crossed the Nanluo Bridge at a very fast speed. It is expected to reach your previous artillery position in 4 minutes. For minutes, Chen Chen couldn't help but be stunned. Before the bombardment, the gap between our side and the Lion Corps was nearly 20 minutes. Now, with 4 minutes to reach the artillery position, plus the 4 minutes of our own lead, the gap has been shortened to 8 minutes. Now, we are still at least 15 minutes away from entering the Wangkanong mountain area, and at least 45 minutes away from the point where Wanpangsang planned to get off and walk. Although the road becomes increasingly difficult to travel after passing the artillery position, and they may not be able to catch up, basic preparations still need to be done. Thinking of this, he immediately said, Number 2, use the heavy machine gun to shoot while moving, find suitable targets on the roadside, knock down the trees, and add some roadblocks for them. Clear. After the shelling was completed, Bao Qi, who had been standing behind the machine gun, immediately responded. Then he raised the muzzle of the gun and continuously fired long bursts at both sides of the road. From the rearview mirror, Chen Chen saw branches and tree trunks constantly falling down. At a corner, a large tree with a diameter of more than 20 centimeters was even cut in half and fell directly on the road. It should be able to buy quite some time. Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief and looked down at the map again. At this time, they had completely left the Myanmar City area and had just arrived at the location of the original Wananai camp. If they continued westward, they would be able to take the timber transportation road from Wangkanong to Wanpangsang. If you walk along this narrow and winding path for about half an hour, you will reach the canyon where the drop-off point is. It seems to be going smoothly. Number 4, you are about to be out of radio range. You are on your own from now on. The voice of the jackal came from the headset. The words sounded a bit helpless, but Chen Chen didn't care. Understood. Happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Garo has provoked a motorcycle. They are speeding up. You will be caught up. 4 motorcycles. Very fast. Don't let them hold you back. Don't. Be prepared. The signal attenuation finally reached the threshold. In the absence of a mobile network, the Dongfeng Corps' connection with number 0, or the base camp, was cut off. Chen Chen didn't feel nervous. He glanced at the back seat in confusion, then asked, For motorcycles holding us back? What's going on? Don't they know that we have heavy machine guns? 10 minutes later, the warrior car passed Wananai and officially entered the log trail. The speed of the 4-wheel vehicle slowed down immediately, and Chen Chen even began to regret why he did not choose a motorcycle. To be honest, if you use a motorcycle, although it still cannot solve the problem of being stared at from beginning to end, it really runs faster. However, speed must be achieved at the expense of load capacity. If they really used motorcycles, they would not be able to carry so much heavy equipment, let alone artillery fire. They could not even carry 40 rounds of ammunition. At that time, it will really be a matter of speed and luck, rather than relying on strength to pass the level. So, all in all, it's a good thing that the warrior car is easy to use. But of course, the pursuing motorcycles must also be dealt with. Less than 5 minutes after driving on the log trail, Chen Chen saw a motorcycle chasing him from behind. Without him saying anything, Bao Qi opened fire immediately. Although the bumps in the vehicle made it difficult for him to aim, the Type 85 heavy motorcycle was still in Type 85 heavy motorcycle after all. Just one bullet grazed the body of the rider in front, and his left arm was torn off directly. The bullet did not stop and continued to penetrate the body of the passenger behind him. They have bazookas. They want to hold us back, Bao Qi shouted loudly. And at this time, Chen Chen had already taken off his night vision goggles and used the red dot side sight to aim at the lights of the motorcycle in the distance. Bang, bang, bang. The uninterrupted long bursts of shooting continued. In such an extreme environment, Chen Chen's heartbeat became faster and faster, and his hands became more and more shaking. All the bullets missed the target and none of them hit the target. He was very anxious. This feeling of knowing what to do, but not being able to do it was really a headache. At one point, he even subconsciously returned to his habit as a recruit and bit his lips with his teeth. But at a certain moment in this continuous shooting, suddenly a bullet hit the target. The rider fell to the ground, and the passenger behind him rolled several meters. Then, his subconscious took over Chen Chen's body. Without thinking, the tilted muzzle of the gun automatically shifted to the right and fired 3 rapid bursts of bullets into the chest of the passenger, who was holding the RPG rocket launcher and standing up to aim. Feeling back, Chen Chen had no time to rejoice. He turned the gun around and fired at the vehicle while it was moving at a distance of nearly 100 meters. With 6 bullets, he shot down another motorcycle. At the same time, Bao Qi, who had emptied the first ammunition belt, also destroyed the last motorcycle. The enemy was smart. They used two-man teams and tried to close the distance and intercept with RPGs. But the problem was that the log trail was too narrow, so narrow that they had no room to maneuver. You wouldn't fire on the move, would you? The flames ejected by the 40 fire are no joke, and although the recoil is not exaggerated, it is really life-threatening when riding on a motorcycle. Thus, the nearest pursuer was dealt with. After thinking for a moment, Chen Chen decisively ordered the car to stop. The PKMS and 85 heavy machine guns fired at the same time, killing a large area of trees on the side of the road. These teak, ironwood, rose, pine, and rosewood trees that had grown for decades were cut down on the road without discrimination, blocking the only road to Wanpongsang. Even if it is blown up by explosion, it can at least delay the pursuers for more than 15 minutes. After getting in the car again, Chen Chen said, "We have basically gotten rid of the first wave of pursuers. Keep going. Get ready to enter the jungle." An hour later, in Munka City, in Vientiane Hotel, Jackal, Peng Shuqing, Chen Chenhe, and Chen Yimin sat together for a rare time. The expressions on the four of them were a little subtle. They each drank the coffee in the cup in front of them, but no one was willing to speak first. After the cup was empty, Peng Shuqing finally smiled and said as a peacemaker, "Hey officers, today's incident is not a small matter, but it is not a big matter either. There is no need to be so tense." Chasely chose the Dongfeng Corps to escort them without informing the 7th Brigade in advance. This is indeed a bit impolite. But we all know that this matter is of great importance, so it is understandable that the Jackal is cautious. He definitely didn't say that he didn't trust the 7th Brigade. The main reason is that there are too many people and too many eyes. We also saw that so many mercenary groups were eyeing that woman. If the news leaked out, it would be a disaster for Chasely. So please give me some face and have a good midnight snack, and this matter will be over. Hearing Peng Shuqing's words, Jackal did not hesitate to take advantage of the situation and said, "Yes, Brigade Commander Chen, Regiment Commander Chen, you all know who is behind this matter. I'll put it in the most unpleasant way possible. Even if we offended the 7th Brigade, we still have a chance to make amends. After all, we are close and everyone can forgive us. But if we offend the people above us, there will be no hope. So please understand both officers. After all, we didn't cause any serious consequences." He spoke in a humble tone, but there was no concession in his words. To put it simply, it means admitting your mistakes and refusing to change no matter what. Anyway, you can't do anything to me. So why do you want to attack Chasely? Your 7th Brigade has more people and more power, but Chasely is easy to bully? If you get angry, the headquarters will issue an order. Your 7th Brigade will still be there, but whether the brigade commander will be there is another question. And it was obvious that Chen Yimin was also very clear about this, even clearer than the Jackal. So since the Jackal showed weakness verbally, he did not continue to be aggressive. The incident itself is not a big deal. The reason we called you here so anxiously is actually because there was too much commotion in the city. There were more than a dozen vehicles and hundreds of people. There were gunfire and explosions in the suburbs. Even the phone lines were disconnected. People who didn't know would think the Burmese army had fallen out with us. You know, the situation in Kokong is not good. Everyone is in danger now. If something like this happens, it will be difficult for us to handle it. This is the beginning of compensation. The Jackal understood and answered immediately. "Brigade Commander Chen, don't worry. We will do a good job in the follow-up work of this matter and will definitely satisfy you." Another point, the gunshots in the suburbs actually have an explanation. The lawless bastards from the Paiyu battalion camped near the Ban the Maimon Nong temple under the pretext of carrying out a mission, killed several monks in the temple, and robbed civilians of their food. What is this? This is an act that seriously undermines unity and is disrespectful to people's beliefs. We just couldn't stand it any longer, so we teamed up with the Public Security Brigade and sent out a team to teach them a lesson. Of course, the blows were a bit heavy, so that was our fault. But the damage caused can be compensated by the spoils obtained from this mercenary group. After saying this, Peng Shuqing looked at Chen Yimin expectantly, and the latter nodded with satisfaction. The four people present finally breathed a sigh of relief. The matter was over like this. The Piaoying is gone and will never exist again. It was destroyed by the Dongfeng Corps, but it was also destroyed by the Security Brigade of the 7th Brigade. Everyone will get what they want, and everyone is very happy. Chen Yimin finally drank the coffee in the cup. Then he smiled and said, "I finished my coffee. Let's have some tea." "I don't know who you learned this from." "Who else?" "A shipwreck." The Jackal muttered in his heart, but did not answer. He just gave a harmless smile. Chen Yimin continued talking on his own. Judging from the time, the people from the Dongfeng Corps should have already entered the jungle. The remaining 2 regiments are still chasing, and this section of the road is not easy to travel. But why do I feel like they can go on? What do you think, Jackal? The Jackal nodded slightly and replied with a smile. "I also think we can go on. With this favorable wind, we have a bright future ahead of us." Meanwhile, near Wanpongsang, the Dongfeng Corps unloaded all necessary equipment and obtained the first batch of drinking water, food and ammunition supplies at the abandonment point. Looking at the daunting jungle in the darkness, Chen Chen waved his hand vigorously and ordered, "Let's go. Into the jungle. We have been away from our pursuers for at least half an hour now." In the dense forest, Chen Chen spoke to the other 4 people. According to intelligence, the Lion Corps has extensive experience in jungle warfare, but they are not well prepared and will definitely need some time to wait for their equipment to be delivered. This is our advantage. Ga Yaozi has a large number of people with complicated backgrounds. They may have a few masters like Lin He, but they can't fight alone. Besides, the Battle of the Piaoying camp should have left a shadow on them. It is impossible for them to catch up with us blindly. All in all, at least for the short term, we are safe. As long as we can maintain our speed and avoid being caught up, the rest of the journey shouldn't be too dangerous. After hearing his words, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. From the moment they left Minka, the team's nerves were basically in an extremely tense state. As we all know, mobile warfare is difficult to fight. In just less than an hour, they fought 4 small-scale battles in a distance of more than 40 kilometers. Moreover, these 4 battles were basically concentrated in the first 20 kilometers. Such density and intensity are almost unimaginable for the Kokong allied forces. What a joke. Who wouldn't have spent a day or two or 3 days dawdling, traveling dozens or hundreds of kilometers before barely firing a few shots or artillery shells? Although the situation was tense, there weren't many times when people died on a large scale. And now, 30 or 40 people were killed in just 1 hour, and our own casualties were 0. The war between gods is no more than this. If in the previous battles, the other 3 members of the Dongfeng Corps saw Chen Chen's ability to strategize and make careful plans, then after today's battle, they truly saw Chen Chen's talent on the battlefield. He reacted so quickly that he could knock down a heavily guarded checkpoint in just a few tens of seconds. He was so agile that he could immediately decide to launch an artillery attack based on the Jackal's simple words, "The enemy is gathering on the west side." He was so meticulous that he did not forget to use machine guns to put trees to create roadblocks while driving away. Bao Qi still remembered that when he just ran away from Kokong, he felt that Chen Chen was qualified to be a company commander. At that time, I was ignorant and thought that I could become an official if I was good at shooting and fighting. Now it seems ridiculous, but just because the idea is ridiculous doesn't mean I'm wrong. With the quality Chen Chen showed now, being a company commander might be unfair to him. The other 2 had similar thoughts. They continued walking for a while with similar thoughts. Shidakai asked in a low voice. "Number 4, can we talk?" Chen Chen pushed aside the vines in front of him and answered. "You can talk, just keep your voice down." In fact, the range of sound wave transmission is limited in the jungle. Now the distance between us and the pursuers is still far, so there is no need to ask them to be completely silent. Otherwise, the nearly 4-day trek would have driven them crazy. After getting Chen Chen's permission, the first person to speak was not Shidakai, but Bao Qi. "Number 4, should we have destroyed the Piaoying battalion in this battle? Are there fewer pursuers?" "That should be the case, but there are also many people from the Lion Corps in Garoja. Garoja alone has more than 100 people, and they are not easy to deal with." Chen Chen kept walking and immediately reminded after answering. "Be careful of the beast path." He immediately applied the experience he learned from Lin He, or the loopholes he filled. The 4 of them carefully bypassed an animal trail that was obviously used by small animals such as wild mice, and continued to move forward in the direction indicated by the GPS. The people of Ga are not of high quality. Many of them are ordinary villagers carrying hoes, which is similar to what we had in Kokong. I think as long as we don't get surrounded and intercept them in sections, we can even wear them down to death. Bao Qi's words were a bit arrogant, but they did not elicit any rebuttal from Shidakai. Instead, he agreed, "I think so too. We have advantages in vision, marksmanship, equipment, and traps. If the Lion Corps is not chasing us closely, we can even wait for Jiaoluya and kill them directly. Otherwise, if the Lion Corps really splits its troops from Jingdong to Mengbin as we planned in our battle plan, and then intercepts us from both ends, we will be in a very passive position once we are surrounded. Whether they divide their forces or not, we are passive." Chen Chen waved his hand and explained, "We still have to realize that the lions chase Kansa's troops in the jungle, and it is not impossible for them to catch up with us in the jungle. It's too dangerous to slow down and fight with Jiaoluya. Unless they really chase us to the point where we can't move anymore, we'd better not take the risk." "Clear." The 3 of them answered at the same time, without saying anything else. For the next 6 hours, the group just kept moving forward, passing through 4 traps and using 2 supply points. The jungle was always quiet. Just as Chen Chen expected, once they entered the jungle, it would be difficult to catch them. After all, this is not a narrow road with obvious targets. Even if the enemy knows that the Dongfeng Corps is going to Mengbin, they don't know which direction they will go or where they will stop to rest. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, the group arrived at the first planned rest camp. Seeing that Jia's physical strength had almost reached its limit and the condition of the 4 people, including himself, began to decline seriously, Chen Chen decisively chose to rest. Of course, it's only an hour. At this time, the sky had begun to brighten. The smokeless stove that had been dug and hidden during the previous route reconnaissance was put into use. With the help of the warmth of the burning flame, several people took turns to dry their clothes that had been wet with dew, and Chen Chen took out the medical kit that had been hidden earlier. Just like Bao Qi in his first training session, Jia also developed symptoms of hypothermia, but Chen Chen was already very experienced in dealing with it. He quickly boiled some hot water and handed it to Jia, who had just been freed from the shackles, along with some high salt and high sugar effervescent tablets to replenish electrolytes. "Thanks." Jia's voice trembled slightly, and her eyes casually swept across the open medical bag, which contained medicines, bandages, and hemostatic bandages, as well as a few scalpels and forceps. "You are welcome. Have a drink first, and then have another drink before you leave, and try to keep your body temperature as high as possible. I know, but I don't think I have enough strength left. When can we take a break? We have to keep walking for another 6 hours. By then, the pursuers will have reached their limit. We will have 5 to 6 hours to rest." Chen Chen broke off a piece of chocolate and handed it to Jia, and continued, "Don't worry, the further we get in, the more rest time we will have. You can make it through it." Jia nodded slightly. "Can you make it through?" Why is he so sure? In fact, after actually experiencing the jungle crossing, even she herself has gradually lost confidence. What if? I can't hold on? What will you do?" she asked. "I have my own way." Chen Chen's expression was calm. Don't worry, you will definitely reach Mingbin alive. The 1-hour rest period was quickly over. The 5 people could only say that they had gotten a temporary respite, but it was impossible for them to fully recover from the physical exhaustion from trekking in the jungle for a long time. Even after a month-long jungle cross-country training, the 4-member team of the Dongfeng Corps were already out of breath. Not to mention Jia, who had only undergone simple training. The moment she stood up, she even felt a little dizzy. She was unsteady on her feet, but she didn't fall down after all. Jia shook her head and looked blankly at the sunlight coming through the woods. With the morning mist, the rays of light formed a fascinating Tyndall effect, and the sound of birds gradually rose. This scene was even a little intoxicating, but she knew that in this land, all the beauty was just an illusion. There are pursuers behind and possible blockades in front. The only purpose of these people is to die. Whether shot to death, stabbed to death, or blown to death by artillery shells, they really don't care about the means. They only care about the result of death. Are these mercenaries? The people escorting him seemed different from them. But what is the difference? Judd didn't have time to think about it, as a pot of hot water was handed to her. Take a few sips. You've used up too much energy and need to replenish your sugar and salt. It was the sunken ship that spoke. Jaya obediently took the kettle and subconsciously took a few big gulps. The effervescent drink has a strange sweet and salty taste, but it is indeed necessary to replenish electrolytes. Should I still be gagged? Jia asked. Not now. You need to keep rehydrating. The other party's tone was calm and relaxed, and Jia's originally uneasy heart inexplicably calmed down a little. Shall we set off then? Add wood to the bonfire and go. Chen Chen spoke immediately. Afterwards, the 5 people set out on their journey again. In order to conceal their tracks to the greatest extent possible, they firmly adhered to the basic principles of jungle anti-tracking. Not only did they not use machetes to clear the way, they even avoided breaking branches and vines as much as possible. There is no doubt that this will slow down their speed further, but fortunately, in the early route exploration, Chen Chen had made sufficient plans and avoided areas with dense vegetation as much as possible. So overall, their speed decay is relatively limited. We should still be widening the gap at the other side. Chen Chen spoke. If the other party has tracked us down, then they should have started triggering the traps. But now, we don't hear any explosions. Theoretically, the sound of a broadsword explosion is around 170 to 180 decibels, with a frequency of 50 to 60 hertz. Based on this data, considering the jungle obstacles, it can be transmitted at least 6 or 7 kilometers away. So, either they haven't reached the first trap yet, or they're going in the wrong direction altogether. In either case, it's a yes for us. Boom! Before Chen Chen could finish his words, a low, tiny but clear sound came from the distant forest. The rest of his sentence was stuck in his throat, and he choked and swore. Grass! This is a single shot. It should be the first trap. The good news is that the enemy is still nearly 5 kilometers away from us. We are 5 hours ahead. The bad news is they might actually be able to catch up with us. Chen Chen's face looked a little heavy. His brows were tightly furrowed, and his mind was quickly deducing all possible situations. In fact, he had long anticipated that the enemy might have jungle tracking experts like Lin He and Lin Shan. However, how efficient and accurate such enemy tracking is remains unknown. There are not many choices. The safest way is to run. Increase the distance as quickly as possible. The greater the distance, the less detectable the traces left behind will be, and the more difficult it will be to track. Speed up, we can't go slow any longer. Chen Chen gave the order decisively. Clear. Number 1, it's your turn to lead the way. Clear. In jungle off-roading, the pioneer is the role that consumes the most physical energy and is generally performed by experienced and physically strong team members. But after entering the jungle, Chen Chen's arrangements were somewhat different. He chose to let Bao Qi and Shi Dakai take turns to lead the way, while letting Li Bang, who had the best physical strength, stay behind. There is no doubt that the physical strength saved for him was to be used at times like this. Li Bang walked past the 4 people in a few steps and came to the front. When passing Jia, he subconsciously looked at her and then found that the condition of this woman was not too bad. His face was not sickly pale, but rather had a bloody flush. That's strange, Li Bang muttered to himself, but did not ask any more questions. For hours passed quickly as they bravely moved forward through all the obstacles. Panting, Li Bang was forced to slow down his pace and said intermittently, Damn, it would be great if it rained heavily. If there's a heavy rain, no one will be able to catch up with us. Hearing his words, Chen Chen couldn't help but nodded. Indeed, if there were weather factors at this time, the difficulty of the entire mission would be reduced by 1 level. Unfortunately, he is not a lucky player. At least in the 10 hours since he set out, God has not been on his side. Rain is a matter of fate. We should go to Minglang Temple to pray for rain before we set out. Sure, Dakai rarely told a joke. Of course, it might not be a joke, after all. Only Chen Chen laughed. The 3 looked at Chen Chen in confusion and asked, What's wrong? Nothing. Chen Chen waved his hand, and at this moment, 2 explosions were heard in quick succession. This time, the sound was clearer. Grass! They've caught up to the camp. Chen Chen shouted in surprise. In 4 hours, the opponent actually closed the gap to 1 hour. They are fast. No matter whether it is Galera or the Lion Army that are chasing us, one thing is certain, that is, there are really masters among them. Number 4, what should we do? Ambush on the spot. Chen Chen immediately shook his head. If you want to ambush, wait until the next camp. The enemy is so fast, it's impossible for a large force to be chasing them. This should be a vanguard sent forward to delay us. We can't let them achieve their goal. We have to use our speed to hold them back and distance them from the main force so that they can be disconnected. Keep going, don't stop. Hold on for another 2 hours, and then ambush us at the camp. Clear. The three of them answered at the same time, but Jia didn't make a sound. Chen Chen looked back and just saw her fall to the ground. I can't walk anymore. Jia's voice was extremely weak, and it was obvious that her physical strength had been overdrawn to the limit. You must get up. Chen Chen reached out and took Jia's kettle, but it was empty. I can't stand up. I really can't stand up anymore. Are you sure? Chen Chen's expression was grim. I'm sure this is physiological exhaustion. I really am. Eat this. Chen Chen didn't let her finish, but stuffed 2 pink pills into Jia's hand. Jia's eyes instantly turned into fear. I don't want it. I don't want it. It's the only option. Chen Chen spoke again, his tone leaving no room for doubt. If you want to stay alive, you must adapt to the most extreme means. If possible, I would even like to call a helicopter to take you directly from Mungka to Mengbin. But you also saw that that was impossible. The road we are taking now is our only road. So, eat it and keep going. Hold on until the next campsite. You can rest for at least 6 hours. Jia looked desperate. She took the pill and tried to make a final struggle. Let me rest for an hour. I can still walk. Believe me, don't risk your life. Chen Chen interrupted her. Of course, don't risk our lives. You saw the medical kit. Do you know what it's for? If you don't eat, if you can't walk anymore, then we'll have to carry you and keep going. But before we carry you, we need you lose weight. Under Chen Chen's intimidation, Jia finally took the pill. Of course, Chen Chen was really just trying to scare him. How could he possibly do such a thing as turning a human being into a pig? What kind of evil person would do such a thing? Besides, there are no conditions for surgery in the jungle, and the risk of amputation is too high. It would be a blessing if we can survive for a few more hours. Of course, that medical kit was only prepared to deal with possible injuries. Only when it comes to the most extreme situation, when the opponent really can't walk at all and will die if she walks any further, and he doesn't have the extra energy to carry her on his back at the last moment, before he kills her with his own hands, will he really try to do this, and then let other people hold back the enemy, while the team member with the most energy carries her on his back to make a solo breakthrough? But of course, generally speaking, this situation is unlikely to occur. In many cases of people getting lost in the jungle, the victims will show amazing vitality. They can even travel dozens of kilometers in a few days. The example of the Dutch girl in the Panamanian jungle is a typical example. With the dual support of medicine and crisis, Chen Chen has reason to believe that Jia can hold on. This is exactly the case. After taking the pill, although Jia's physical strength did not recover, due to the large dose of high-sugar energy bars, a large amount of water for rehydration, and the special effect of the pill, her potential was almost instantly drawn out, and she even seemed a little excited. Chen Chen took advantage of this excitement and drove her forward. Seeing this scene, everyone else in the team understood what was going on. There was already something in the pot of water at the beginning. Energy tea is not uncommon even among the Kokong allied forces. And the 2 pills at the back are even more familiar. After all, they had burned it not long ago. No one would think that Chen Chen's use of this method was inappropriate. As he said, in the current situation, only life is the first priority. Looking at Jia's somewhat mechanical steps, Dakai said seriously. Number 4, I'm afraid we'll have to ambush the camp. Don't take too much of this medicine. It will kill you. Chen Chen shook his head and replied, it's okay. We still have 6 injections of adrenaline and 4 more. The balance will keep her going for a few more hours. Let's not think about her. Let's think about our own situation first. To be honest, after more than 10 hours of high-intensity marching, I am almost exhausted. The enemy's main force must be in the same situation. They must stop and rest in the next camp. We will wait and kill their vanguard first. Such a strategy would cause the Dongfeng Corps to lose the leading advantage that it had worked so hard to establish, but there was no other way. If they did not rest, the Dongfeng Corps would surely be slowly worn down by the opponent. Clear. Should we recycle some of the traps and keep them for use in the camp? Yes, keep an eye out and recover all 4 broadswords from here to Camp 2. Receive. The 3 of them answered together. And so, during the next 2 hours of marching, the group of 4 had an additional task of dismantling traps. Dismantle the trap you set. This means that in the last 2 hours, the Dongfeng Corps will completely lose awareness of the enemy's position. Both sides will fall into a real dark forest state. Whoever can discover it first will have a huge initiative. The Dongfeng Corps has thermal imagers that are extremely useful in jungle warfare, while the other side has experienced jungle hunters. No one has an overwhelming advantage. This is a battle of equal strength. Camp 2 was right in front of us, with a gap of 4 hours between the 2 sides. After a short rest, the first confrontation in the jungle is about to begin. The captain of the Ga Yaozi team, the man known as Evil Wuzi, is going crazy. His name comes from a venomous snake that is widely active in the jungles of northern Myanmar, the Burmese lancehead viper. There is no doubt that this name also represents the characteristics of this person. There's only a wrong name, not a wrong nickname. The reason why he is called Evil Wuzi is because of his insidiousness, his viciousness, his deep calculation, and his fatal attack. But now, he has encountered an enemy who is more insidious, more vicious, and more cunning. The first trace they found was the dense footprints left by the enemy on the beast path. This discovery made everyone in the tracking team excited, because it meant that the enemy might have experience in jungle anti-tracking, but definitely not much. There are 4 experienced and professionally trained hunters in the team. If they can keep following this kind of trail, the other party will definitely not be able to get far. But just when Wuzi ordered to check the trail, an accident happened. There was a Venus flytrap on the ground where the footprints were. The hunter put his foot on it as usual to test the direction and pace of the other party's escape. But with just a light step, his calf was instantly scratched by the long spikes in the trap. He subconsciously wanted to pull his foot out, but how could you pull your foot out of this trap so easily? The long nails arranged diagonally downward pierced into the muscles under the action of reverse pulling force, and screams spread throughout the entire forest. Yaozi was stunned. He was considered an experienced veteran, but he would never have thought that the other party could set up such a concealed and sophisticated trap in such a short time. They walked more cautiously on the way forward. All the traces they found were tested by cannon fodder first, and then checked. But even so, I still got caught. The other party set up a separate trip mine, with the trigger device at the trace, and the actual killing device was 20 meters away. The two devices were connected by a taut thin wire, and the other party even used wooden stakes driven deep into the ground to make a simple change of direction. The broadsword mine, with an explosion angle of 60 degrees, swept across the entire area. If the team was not located at the edge of the explosion range, this alone would have almost wiped out the entire tracking team. But even so, Yaozi was forced to leave 3 more people here. The tracking team was reduced from 22 members to 18. After doing this again and again, Yaozi thought he had figured out the opponent's tactics, and in fact he did successfully eliminate the third trap. But the fourth one is a completely different approach. It was a camp, and the other party had obviously rested there. After a careful check and confirmation that there were no ambushes or traps, Yaozi allowed the hunter to go forward and observe. He ordered that nothing that was left should be moved, not even a loose stone. His caution allowed them to successfully check the entire camp and confirm the direction of the enemy's escape without triggering any booby traps or causing any casualties. At that moment, Yaozi really breathed a sigh of relief. He thought he had won the battle over the trap. But less than a minute later, he was slapped hard in the face. A member of the team who was born in a farming family saw that the bonfire was still burning and subconsciously kicked the firewood to scatter and put out the fire. This is a common action to avoid forest fires. But the question is, how could the bonfire burn for so long? It was obvious that the other party had deliberately added more firewood before leaving. The purpose of adding firewood is to lure one's own side to put out the fire. The moment he saw that person's action, Yaozi had already reacted. He shouted for everyone to lie down, and this action saved many lives. A trigger device connected by a steel cable detonated 2 broadsword mines buried under the loose soil, and the steel ball swept across the entire camp at a distance of 10 meters. If he hadn't moved quickly, he would have been beaten to a pulp. 6 of the 18 men fell. Evil Yaozi was confused. The variety of ways the other party used traps and the accuracy of their grasp of human nature were things he had never seen before. There was anger in his heart, but more than that, there was fear. This was the real poisonous snake. What kind of evil Yaozi am I? You are. We must catch up with them, and kill them all. But the question is, can we really catch up with them? Even if we catch up with them, can we really defeat them? There is no answer to this question. 2 hours later, the group of 5 finally arrived at camp number 2. In fact, the second half of the journey was much easier because the camp was located at the top of a sunny hillside. On the northwest side of the hillside, due to the difference in sunshine and precipitation, the lushness of vegetation has dropped significantly. In addition, with the increase in altitude, the proportion of pine and fir trees has begun to increase, and the terrain has appeared flatter. This is exactly why Chen Chen chose to ambush in this camp. Not to mention the high altitude attack. The sparsely vegetated belt nearly 500 meters long and several kilometers wide is the enemy's biggest obstacle. If they want to cross this isolation belt and approach the Dongfeng Corps, they will have to pay the price of large-scale casualties. And if they can really use their firepower advantage to suppress the group of 4 and advance to the distance of fair combat, the group of 4 can also retreat calmly from the other side of the hillside and escape back into the dense forest. The only flaw is that the opponent may launch an attack from the side and catch us off guard. In order to avoid this risk, Chen Chen intentionally left a lot of traces while moving forward, with the aim of allowing the enemy to bite him to death and chase him along the traces. He didn't know whether the other party would take the bait or not, but he had done everything he should do. This is how it is on the battlefield. A lot of the preparations you do may never be used in your lifetime, but if you don't do them one day, your life will be over. After arriving at the camp, he selected several of the best shelters and set traps. If a battle broke out, the enemy would be hit by a broadsword as long as they sought shelter. After all the preparations were completed, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, they are about 4 hours ahead of the enemy's vanguard and at least 6 hours or more ahead of the enemy's main force. There is still plenty of time to rest. At the camping site on the east side of the slope top, Chen Chen directly banged to light a bonfire, and they still followed the established procedures to dry clothes, boil water, and rest. After a brief repair, they took turns on guard in groups of 1. The first group on guard was Li Bang, who was the most physically exhausted and in need of rest, so he was responsible for the easiest first post, while Chen Chen himself was in the third post, which was also the most dangerous and difficult one. Eat first, then rest. Hold your backpack against your chest to maintain your core body temperature. It's better to sweat than to feel cold. Clear. Bao Qi and Shi Dakai answered immediately, then set up a kettle to boil water and swallowed the energy bars in big gulps. For this battle, Chen Chen did not prepare any so-called individual rations. Although that thing looked convenient, it was still too troublesome in a jungle chase. To be honest, it was not as useful as a bar of chocolate and a piece of beef jerky. Is it unpalatable? It's only 4 days, so I'm going to die from eating it. Of course, after eating this stuff 4 times in 12 hours, Chen Chen was a little sick of it. He chewed it twice, swallowed the energy bar with water, and then went to check on Jia's condition. The effect of 2 pills doesn't actually last long, especially when you're extremely tired. At this time, Jia had collapsed to the ground, her eyelids twitching constantly, but she was conscious. Drink water, eat food, and swallow it if you want to live. Chen Chen said, without question. Jia struggled to sit up, took the thing from Chen Chen's hand, and swallowed it in a few mouthfuls like him. You are a devil. Maybe you shouldn't be called a shipwreck. You should be called Satan. 2 hours of painful experience made Jia completely lose her good impression of the man in front of her. Although she knew that he was indeed saving her life by doing that, and although reason told her that she must not blame him, but emotionally speaking, no one can smile to the abuser after suffering torture. A little-known fact: the first drug experience of any kind is unlikely to be a pleasant one. Nausea, vomiting, and pain are the most common adverse reactions. In severe cases can even lead to cardiac arrest and acute organ failure. This is why Chen Chen prepared so much adrenaline. Therefore, he was not surprised by Jia's reaction and just replied calmly, "I just save people in Satan's way. In your culture, maybe you should call me Gabriel." Gabriel is just corrupted. He is not as violent as you. You should be called Shura. This is the most appropriate description of you in your culture. That is Buddhist culture, not my culture. Chen Chen rolled his eyes, took Jia's water bottle, threw in an effervescent tablet, and then stuffed it back into the other person's hand. Drink and go to sleep. You have at least 4 hours. Jia stopped talking, drank the still hot water in one gulp, and then fell asleep. Chen Chen shook his head and also fell asleep holding his gun. Worry, anxious, alert, does not exist. The rotation order has been arranged, and now all he has to do is put everything aside and rest. This is the most correct way and the most correct mentality. Just pretend that the enemy does not exist. Thinking too much like a fool will only reduce the efficiency of physical recovery and bring worse results. It took Chen Chen less than a minute to fall asleep, and when he was woken up again, Bao Qi from the second post was standing in front of him. Is there anything going on? Chen Chen regained consciousness quickly, stood up lightly, and asked. No, it's a routine change of guard. Understood. Go and rest. Chen Chen stood up, took out a telescope, climbed up the hillside, and began to observe and stand guard at a fixed hiding point. This job is very boring and very tiring. Rotational guard sounds very high-sounding, but in reality it is just one person holding a telescope and scanning the observation range in front of him like a fool. All you see is the same old scenery. And the most ridiculous thing is that even if you see something interesting, you can't be attracted by it. For example, Chen Chen wanted to watch the two pheasants fighting on the distant hillside for a while longer, but he had to move the telescope away to search for possible locations of the enemy. For a moment, he even hoped that the enemy would appear soon, because that meant that they had completely distanced themselves from the large force that followed. After killing them, he might be able to sleep for 2 more hours. Of course, his wish was dashed. But he really saw someone, and it's an acquaintance. Lena. He was alone, holding a worn-out Type 56 submachine gun in his hand, but he was definitely not here to hunt. He walked in a hurry, stopping from time to time to observe the traces on the ground, obviously tracking something. Chen Chen put down the telescope, turned on the safety of the 416 Hong Kong dollars, put his eyes close to the small conch, and pressed the trigger with his finger. He really didn't want to shoot, but he had to do it. Chen Chen took a deep breath and prepared himself mentally. But at this moment, Lenny made a move that made Chen Chen release the trigger immediately. He bent down and wiped away the marks on the ground, the mark that I left intentionally. So, you think we are good people? Chen Chen sat opposite Lin He and asked in disbelief. You can't say that. I don't think you are good, but you killed Ga Danwei from the Piaoyi. He has a grudge against me. Ga Danwei is a bad guy, so you should be good. Yeah, yes, you should be fine. Lenny had a matter-of-fact expression on his face. Chen Chen scratched his head subconsciously and continued to ask, do you know how dangerous it is for you to do this? It wasn't that dangerous. I just walked faster than them. Oh, and I didn't touch the traps you set. They stepped on a few of them and died, but I didn't count. However, the death of a few people is not a big deal for them. They have transferred people from Kantugu, and they will definitely transfer people from Wanakang. There were 22 people when they left Kantugu, and several died. If they were to replenish now, there should be at least 30 people. I'm only 1 hour ahead of them at most. You have to hurry up, or you won't be able to leave. Hearing Lin He's words, Chen Chen nodded slightly, basically confirming that Lin He was not lying. Wanakang is a small hill near Wampangsang. Like Kantugu, there is a hunter settlement there. Just as Lin He said, if Ga Yaozi can find Kantugu, he can definitely find Wanakang. This is not beyond Chen Chen's expectations. What really surprised him was that when Ga Yaozi found Lin He and asked him to join the tracking, he not only refused, but also took the initiative to warn his side. In his previous intuition, Lin He should have been found by other mercenary groups and appeared in front of him as an enemy. But now, what the hell is he trying to achieve? Throwing a stone to test the water? Or is it the light of humanity in a chaotic place? No matter which situation it is, Lin He is a little too naive. No, it can't be said to be naive, but the logic of his actions tends to be extremely simple. He will eliminate most of the interfering factors and make judgments based only on the most core elements. Ga Danwei owed him pension and refused to pay it, so he had a grudge against Ga Danwei. The Dongfeng Corps killed Ga Danwei, so they were also doing him a favor. If there is hatred, it must be avenged. If there is favor, it must be repaid. This is his logic. Simple to the extreme, direct to the extreme. It is probably this kind of thinking that makes him so talented in jungle tracking. After all, this is something that needs to be done with minimal distractions. I understand. We'll consider it. Chen Chen nodded slightly, then continued, but we probably won't leave. You may be able to see that our physical strength has reached its limit, and we must rest. So, we'll stage a counter ambush here. Oh. Lenny nodded thoughtfully and said, wild boars would do the same thing. Yes, wild boars would do the same. Chen Chen understood what he meant, but it certainly didn't sound very nice. Then do you want me to help you? I mean, I can't help you yet, but I can help you do some reconnaissance and find out where they are, how many people there are, and how many teams they are divided into. You will? Chen Chen asked in surprise. I can't help you yet. You were supposed to wait here. It's another repeated sentence. Chen Chen thought for a moment and finally replied, then go ahead. Don't force it. Put your own safety first. Good. After a simple answer, Linny turned over and ran back the way he came. He was very fast, looking exactly like a son of the jungle. Chen Chen sighed again, feeling extremely regretful. He is really a good candidate, but why did I beat his brother to death? This was probably the helplessness of the contradiction. No matter how he thought about it, without knowing how the future would develop, even if the scene reappeared, he would still shoot without hesitation. With this thought in mind, Chen Chen slept for another hour, and when he woke up, Lin he just came back. They're still more than an hour away from us. They are moving much slower than I expected. I followed them for a while and heard from them that the main group behind them had stopped to rest. Now there were about 30 people rushing over, all crowded together. I don't know the exact number. If you want to set an ambush, can you defeat them, all crowded together? That means their bait has worked. They probably really think they have found the trail and plan to concentrate their forces to catch the Dongfeng Corps in one fell swoop. Well, the basic quality of the Northern Burmese armed forces is just like this. There is no need to lower their intelligence because their intelligence is only high enough to think that numbers mean strength. Are all those here from Ga Yaozi? Chen Chen asked. Yes, they're all from Ga Yaozi. The main force includes people from the Lion Corps. I heard that the Lion Corps was divided into several groups, some fast and some slow. But Ga Yaozi's people don't know their specific locations. Don't know? That's right, this is how a serious armed force should operate. It seems that the real tough battle will still fall on the Lion Corps. I understand. Let's fight. Chen Chen made a decisive decision, then immediately woke up everyone and made arrangements according to General Lin's standard 4-4 system. This thing is an enhanced version of the 3-3 system. In addition to the standard support cover assault, there is also an additional main shooter who is responsible for precise harvesting. Among the 4 people in the Eastern Corps, Li Bang, as a demolitionist, is a natural covert. Bao Qi is a machine gunner, but his role is not to output firepower, but to provide support. Shi Dekai is the real assaulter, or simply called the deputy shooter in a defensive battle. The one who is really going to deal a lot of damage is Chen Chen, the firepower outputter, or the main shooter. This tactic has been proven in countless battles, and Chen Chen doesn't believe that the enemy can quickly find a way to restrain it. It was getting dark now. If Zhao's scouts dared to continue chasing us, then I would be in trouble. There is no return. They are not as well equipped and have high combat qualities as the Lion Corps. I don't know where they got the courage from. They actually dare to follow us. I guess these people are really cannon fodder, used specifically to tie up the Dongfeng Corps. Looking at this situation, Linny said thoughtfully, well, I think you should be able to win. After saying that, he lay down on the ground and stopped talking. Chen Chen asked doubtfully, why don't you leave? I couldn't leave. I followed too closely and was spotted by someone I knew, but they didn't shoot. Got an acquaintance in Kantugu? Who is it? Enemy. There was obvious hatred in Lin He's tone, and seeing his current expression, Chen Chen was almost 100% sure that the other party did not regard him as an enemy. This made him curious. What happened to cause such a big vengeance? Even bigger than his brother's death? What did he do? Chen Chen asked. He stole a wild boar from us. We clamped it, but he insisted that it was theirs. Then what? Then my parents died in July 2001. My father got sick and died. 2 days later, my mother hanged herself. I was only 6 years old at that time, very skinny, and my mother was hanging, so I couldn't hold her. I ran to find my brother, and when he saw that I was wet, he thought it was my pee, but it was actually my mom's. Suffocatingly heavy. Chen Chen thought he had seen a lot of hardships, but Lin He's simple words left him speechless for a long time. Have you ever thought of revenge? He asked. We don't have a gun. We just bought one with the money given by the Piaoying Battalion, 1,100 yuan. Before that, we always set traps or used knives to hunt wild boars. No wonder, this is how these 2 people developed their skills in the jungle. No wonder he had to get the gun back. No wonder he acted so calm about his brother's death. In July 2001, the 2 teenagers died. Giving me the gun is like saving my life. Chen Chen remembered what Lin He had said before. It turns out that saving his life does not mean that only with a gun can he survive by hunting, but that only with a gun can he have a chance to replace that enemy. Chen Chen took a deep breath and then said, here's the telescope for you. Tell me who that person is later. I'll break his legs first and leave it to you to kill him. Remember, when the fight starts, after you point out the target, you go back to the back of the slope and help me keep an eye on this woman. Here, this stick is for you. If she moves, you can hit her with it. But be careful not to kill him. Also, don't show your head under any circumstances. If we die, you just run away. Do you understand? Don't think you can help. You can only fight wild boars, not people. Do you understand? Understood. Linny nodded seriously, then took the stick from Chen Chen and looked at Jiaya with a fierce look. At this time, Jia was still asleep. Or should I say, in a coma, and had no idea that a stick might fall on her head at any time to give her physical hypnosis. But this is also a good thing. The problem that Chen Chen was worried about before, the goods would run around on the battlefield because they couldn't bear the pressure, was solved. Looking at Lin He's performance, Chen Chen nodded with satisfaction. If I were to describe this young man's performance in the simplest and most appropriate way, it would be knowledgeable. He knew that he had no better way, so he chose to follow the Dongfeng Corps first. At the same time, he also knew that he really couldn't fight, so he obediently followed Chen Chen's arrangements. This is natural obedience, and it is an obedience based on reason. What a good seedling. Chen Chen was very happy. What does it mean to have a winding road? What does it mean that there is always a way out when you reach the mountain? Isn't that right? If he helps Lin He kill this enemy, at least the grudges between him and his brother can be written off. By recruiting him at that time, there would be no need to worry about him becoming an unstable bomb. Of course, I am not simply taking advantage of Lin He's suffering. No matter what, the wicked must always be punished. If Lin He is unwilling to join the Eastern Legion in the end, he will not force him. The most I can do is think of more ways to convince him. However, all this would have to wait until he got back alive. Chen Chen turned and went to the top of the slope, hid himself in his position, then set up his gun, put on night vision goggles, switched to thermal imaging mode, and began to quietly wait for the enemy to appear. The field of vision in the dense forest was no more than 30 meters, and now the field of vision in the sparse jungle in front of them was no more than 200 meters. In fact, it is completely sufficient to use a thermal imager without magnification. I used a telescope to observe before only because it was not dark yet. Time passed by minute. After nearly 4 hours of rest, the Eastern Corps had recovered their energy. Everyone was very focused. Even Chen Chen was not the first one to discover the enemy. Number 4, enemy spotted at 3 o'clock. Sure Dakai's voice came from the radio. Chen Chen replied in a low voice received, then turned his head to look to the right front. Sure enough, in the woods, several human-shaped red blocks emerged, and the most eye-catching among them was a huge red area that looked like a searchlight. That was obviously not the infrared light that humans could emit, but an active infrared night vision device that was almost obsolete and could be considered an antique. The principle of this thing is completely different from the commonly used passive infrared night vision. It cannot actively receive the weak infrared rays emitted by the human body and objects above absolute zero. Instead, it first uses the device's own infrared headlight to project infrared rays outward, and then the receiver receives the infrared echo to form an image on the screen. Under this working principle, the images it presents do not have the target screening function like real passive infrared or thermal imaging. In other words, human targets will not be highlighted like in the game. To understand this better, just look at the footage from a surveillance camera. Chen Chen still remembered that in his previous life, he had seen various so-called secretly filmed videos on different platforms. The black and white images were typical active infrared images. Perhaps in urban combat or combat on non-complex terrain, this night vision device is still very useful. But in the jungle, due to the short reconnaissance distance, limited ability to identify complex vegetation, and low imaging resolution, this thing can be said to be quite useless. But useless does not mean completely useless. At least, the other side was consciously organizing forward reconnaissance. Everyone stay hidden. Don't move. This is active infrared night vision. They can't see us. Chen Chen gave an order in a low voice, and then the other 3 replied, received in turn. Chen Chen carefully moved a few times and retracted the muzzle of the gun under the bunker. What he was most worried about now was that the enemy's forward reconnaissance team was too far away from the rear troops. It would be a small matter if they triggered the trap. What if they came all the way and got close to the camp? Should he fight or not? If he fought, his position would be exposed and he would lose the perfect ambush opportunity. If you don't fight, the opponent will still discover you, which will make you more passive. It was difficult to decide, and there was no good solution. However, his worry lasted less than a minute. Because soon, the enemy's large force was exposed. The distance between them and the forward reconnaissance firepower was less than 100 meters. Indeed, in dense jungle combat, a forward firepower reconnaissance of 100 meters is a relatively reasonable distance, because it can not only ensure timely support from the rear, but also ensure that the reconnaissance team can evacuate in time and avoid meaningless casualties. But the problem is, that is the distance that should be used in the dense forest. Now, they have entered the sparse jungle. This 100-meter distance directly exposed the entire team to the ambushers' shooting range. The enemy had some experience, but not much, and this was also an opportunity for the Dongfang Corps. Number 4, the enemy's main force is coming. Using the flashlight, there is a lot of light. I can see that there are about 30 people. I can identify the commander. He is in the center of the team. Should I shoot? Sure Dakai's voice came from the headphones. The voice was very low, but barely audible. They're too far away. Let's get a little closer and wait for them to enter the trap. Number 3, you hit the leader first. Chen Chen replied. Yes, they have their lights on. I want to take off the night vision goggles first and use the SVD to fight. Agree. Chen Chen answered briefly, then flipped up the night vision goggles with minimal movement and continued. Number 2, pay attention to the machine gun fire suppression. If necessary, knock down a few trees to clear the firing range for us. Understood. I am responsible for providing support and creating conditions for shooting. Very good. Bao Qi repeated the 4-4 system arrangement that Chen Chen had made earlier, which made Chen Chen very satisfied. Number 1, use smoke to block the firing range. Be careful when throwing grenades. Don't use them if there is no chance. Don't let them hit us. Understood. I am mainly responsible for clearing approaching enemies with a shotgun. Ouch. I learned very quickly. It seems that although Li Banghan is silly, he is not stupid. Everything was arranged properly, and all enemies had entered the range of 150 meters, but Chen Chen still did not give the order to shoot. Although he can hit the target at this distance, there are too many obstacles in a shooting range, which makes it difficult for him to harvest quickly. Wait a little longer. 100 meters away, the enemy's fire reconnaissance team had stopped, as if waiting for the team behind to catch up. They still didn't find anything unusual and didn't deliberately look for cover. This resulted in at least 20 people out of the entire team of more than 30 being exposed to the Dongfang Corps' firing range. Do you see the target? Chen Chen turned his head slightly and asked Lin He. Yes, it's next to the big rock on the left. Lin He pointed out the target. Chen Chen quickly turned the gun around and then whispered. Lin He retreats. Start fighting. Almost instantly, his finger pressed down on the trigger. The feeling he had just regained was still there. And with the 4x magnification effect of the small conch, the man's left calf was immediately pierced by the bullet, and he fell to the ground in pain. Chen Chen didn't even look at him, but moved the gun away flipped down the night vision goggles and switched to low-light mode, tilted the gun to the right, used the red dot side aiming, and began to harvest one by one. The enemy's flashlights were too late to turn off, and in the dark woods, they were simply live targets. Even though the flashlight glare affected the low-light imaging effect to a certain extent, who could stop a precise shooter with a hot hand? What caught my eye was just a shadow of white light, but after the gunshot, a living person fell to the ground. At the same time, the other three also started moving. The unique bang-bang sound of SVD was heard, and within just a few seconds, Ga actually fired 2 shots. This is already a very efficient firing rate. The fact that he can fire means that he has hit the target. The 7.62 by 54mm caliber bullet will not leave much time for a person shot in the torso to recover. The commander is down, Ga shouted. His voice was quite clear through the active noise reduction headphones. On the other side, KPMS also began to show its power. With continuous short bursts of fire, an enemy who tried to fight back fell down first, while the others were completely confused. They only knew to turn off the lights and lie on the ground, thinking that they could avoid the bullets, but they didn't know that this was just a way to kill Bao Qi, who had turned on the thermal imaging mode. He even had enough energy to prioritize his targets, first taking out 2 enemies who were trying to aim with their RPGs. Before he had used up 1/3 of a 300-round ammunition belt, Bao Qi had already claimed 3 lives. After failing to find a new target, he immediately turned his gun around, and with a few long bursts of fire, he knocked down several small pine trees in front of Chen Chen, clearing a wider shooting range for him. Reload! Bao Qi sautet lao li. Li Bang, who had just shot down a charging enemy in the reconnaissance team with a Type 97-2, immediately took over his supporting firepower, switched to a Type 81 rifle, and continued firing with a TOB grip. Don't hold the AK, press it. The same is true for the Type 81 rifle. His long training period played a unique role. He didn't need to shout reload at all. After the bullets were used up, he could replace another magazine in less than 2 seconds. Bullets flew like rain, and the accuracy was really poor. Not even a single enemy was knocked down. But who can say he is useless? The firepower density of a Type 81 rifle is almost as high as that of Bao Qi's PKMS. The handguard has started to get hot, but he didn't let go. Reloading completed. Bao Qi's voice was heard again, and Li Bang immediately put down his Type 81 rifle, picked up the shotgun beside him again, and shot the enemy who had been shot and fallen to the ground, but was now climbing up and rushing forward. The Type 97-2 shotgun has a pellet dispersion of 155 centimeters within a range of 50 meters, which is enough to cover a person's entire body. Li Bang's firing distance was about 60 meters. At this distance, let alone hitting a person, even shooting a duck could be hit by 1 or 2 lead bullets. Of course, the lethality is greatly reduced, but the problem is that few of the enemies in front of us are wearing bulletproof vests. With the sound of gunfire, the man fell to the ground again. Although he was still struggling to crawl towards the shelter, he no longer had much combat ability. Attack the one with night vision goggles first, Chen Chen shouted loudly. At this moment, he had only one thought in his mind. Comfortable, very comfortable. The trio worked together unexpectedly smoothly, creating almost perfect shooting conditions for themselves. He just fired one shot and another. With every gunshot, an enemy fell. The enemy turned off or abandoned the flashlight, and the low-light night vision goggles were no longer enough. So he turned on the infrared imaging mode, tilted the gun again, and started using the machine aiming. At a distance of 100 meters, his accuracy hardly dropped. Hit it as soon as it shows its head, and you will hit it. This feeling is so comfortable. Chen Chen even felt a little overwhelmed. There were not enough enemies in front of him. Although I have regained the feeling now, I am only accurate and not fast. Do a few dozen more to get his senses back to the peak. But obviously, he didn't have that chance. The first enemy to react rushed behind the best cover they could see and triggered the broadsword trap that had been set up long ago. There was a loud bang. Then there were 3 more explosions in quick succession. The enemy's morale was directly destroyed. Too fast. In less than 2 minutes, Chen Chen and Ga killed 3 people in succession, followed by Bao Qi's PKMS, who killed 3 people, and Li Bang, who killed 1 person. Even after the enemy reacted and began trying to hide, Chen Chen still killed 6 of them. The other 3 people were not without gains either. At least they killed 3 more people. Yes, the enemy was trying to fight back, and some of them were blindly firing into the Eastern Corps' gunfire. But the problem is that not even a single bullet actually flew to a distance that posed a threat to the 4 people. Finally, for broadswords completely destroyed their confidence. There were more than 30 people coming, and more than 20 of them fell down as soon as they met. How can we fight this? I know that being near a jungle is good for the defenders and the weaker side, but it shouldn't be this good, right? Run, run. Chen Chen saw the enemy's fleeing movements, so he decisively ordered. Ga stays behind. The others chase quickly. Group 1 and 2, bypass the main battlefield from the left, avoid the dangerous shooting range of corpses and wounded soldiers, and intercept from the side. Run faster, sprint as hard as you can, and try to kill them all, but don't chase them too deep. Today, there is a big chapter of 4,000 words, and it will be on the shelf soon. On the first day of listing, 20,000 words will be added, and 10,000 words will be added every day thereafter. It will be on the shelves on the 25th, and I will sacrifice a new book opened by a big boss's Smuff account first. Wang Yi was reborn in 1982. After graduating from Huaqing University, he volunteered to be the director of the Red Star military factory and carry out military-to-civilian reform. We agreed to transfer from military to civilian use. What happened to this gas tank? When the superiors saw the first product Wang Yi developed for the Red Star military factory, they were stunned. Chen Chen rushed out of the bunker quickly with a gun in hand, then ran all the way to the right along the east side of the top of the hill. After running 200 meters and leaving the no man's land in the core area of the battlefield, He turned left and began to chase in the direction of the enemy's escape. The reason for doing this instead of directly crossing the no man's land is actually to avoid those corpses that have not been shot again from suddenly attacking themselves. Of course, this would slow down the pursuit, but failing to catch up with a person was better than being shot down by someone. There were 6 enemies fleeing in front of him, but the distance was now more than 300 meters, and they did not turn on the lights and were still moving. In this situation, it was almost impossible for him to hit the opponent by relying on the low-light night vision goggles and red dot sights. His only chance was to keep moving forward and try to deal a final wave of damage before the opponent entered the dense forest. After deciding on the tactics, he quickened his pace again. However, the jungle was still a jungle after all. No matter how sparse the vegetation was, it was still not comparable to the flat ground. After chasing for nearly 50 meters, the opponent had reached the edge of the dense forest. Chen Chen did not hesitate, raised his gun, aimed, and fired a short burst of shots. The enemies fell to the ground immediately. Not just one, but all 6 active targets fell. It was obvious that they were not knocked down, but were just reacting subconsciously after hearing the gunshots and the sound of bullets piercing the branches. People's fear in the dark will always be infinitely magnified. It is not an exaggeration to say that the current enemies are like frightened birds, and this just gives Chen Chen an opportunity. He rushed forward while firing intermittently. When the bullets were empty, he immediately tilted the gun to the left to eject the magazine, then quickly inserted a new magazine, pressed the empty chamber button, and pulled the trigger, thus buying back a few seconds to reload through fire suppression. After several operations, the distance has been shortened to 150 meters. At this distance, the opponent no longer has any chance. He opened fire and hit the enemy closest to him. The opponent was still lying on the ground when a bullet penetrated his shoulder, leaving him no time to fight back. The enemies around him finally came to their senses after hearing his screams and raised their guns and fired wildly at the fire where Chen Chen was shooting. This was the most dangerous moment Chen Chen had encountered in the entire battle. He threw himself to the ground, switched his night vision goggles to thermal imaging mode, and tried to look up and forward. But the terrain here had begun to become complicated, and he could not see anything except patches of weeds and bushes. But of course, the enemy could not hit him either. Chen Chen waited patiently, but the gunshots continued almost nonstop. This made his heart sink, and he quickly stood up and took an observation. Those who survive to the end are indeed the elite. Being able to run fast and escape is a skill. It is not easy to maintain such continuous firepower, and the opponent actually uses the legendary center stripping tactic. The core foundation of this tactic is also the stripping principle, which means that under the premise of maintaining continuous firepower, all personnel take turns to provide cover, empty magazines, and evacuate in turn. Theoretically, the stripping tactics can be divided into left stripping, right stripping, backward stripping, oblique stripping, etc. according to various directions, each of which may be used during the retreat process. However, center peeling is special, because this is a two-way evacuation action carried out in the form of a double column, which is different from other single-column one-way stripping. The entire team will evacuate from the center to the sides and rear at the same time. The team will gradually retreat and extend to both sides, giving the enemy the illusion that reinforcements are gradually gathering from the left and right. This is easy to understand. The gunfire on the left and right sides is getting more and more frequent. Isn't it reinforcements coming? If it is an inexperienced pursuer, it is very likely to be deceived by such an illusion and choose to retreat or stick to observation, and this is their real chance to escape. Although Chen Chen saw through their plan, he had to admit that the other party must be really elite to be able to use such tactics in such an environment in such a tense situation. If they're not dealt with quickly, they can really run away. At least one side can run away. What to do? The suppression continued. Chen Chen crawled to the right. After sensing that there were no more bullets flying over his head, he quickly stood up to observe, and then suddenly pulled the trigger. Bullets poured out and hit the enemy, who was shouting commands. But then, the opponent's gun immediately locked onto his new position. Suppressed again, this time the situation is even more dangerous. Chen Chen no longer hesitated. He reached out and took out a smoke bomb and threw it forward. The rising smoke blocked the vision of both parties at the same time, but through infrared imaging, he could still see the swaying red figure. One is not enough. Chen Chen once again threw 3 smoke bombs in succession, blocking an entire area 40 meters wide in front. Then he quickly crawled to the far left and started shooting through the smoke. Another red silhouette fell. The continuous firepower was interrupted, and Chen Chen finally seized the opportunity. He continued to move to the left, making a small circle, and then fired at the enemies exposed to his firing range. This time, the opponent's stripping tactics were finally completely broken. The last 2 men had neither night vision goggles nor lights, and now they had no command. They fired blindly, emptied their guns, and then immediately turned and ran into the jungle. There was no alternating cover. It was a completely blind escape. Their speed was too slow, and Chen Chen easily caught up with them. He saw a few flashes of red light in the infrared imaging and quickly aimed and fired, knocking the 2 men down. Then, used grenades to add damage and ensure the kill. After a loud bang, everything was done, and Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He asked the other 2 people on the radio, "Number 1, number 2, how is the situation over there?" "We are cleaning up the battlefield. No one should have escaped." "Understood. Return to the camp and assemble." "Number 3, make up shots at visible targets and leave special targets behind." "Got it. I'm starting to fire." The iconic SVD gunshots began to sound, intermittently, but with a strange rhythm. Chen Chen knew that every gunshot at this time meant the complete loss of a life. It was cruel, but if it wasn't cruel, how could I survive? A few minutes later, the 3 members of the Dongfeng Corps all returned to the camp. With the help of the not-so-bright campfire, Chen Chen saw the bullet holes on Li Bang's bulletproof vest at a glance. There are at least 3 or more. What happened? Did they fight back? Li Bang hummed and replied, for people, taking turns to cover the evacuation, the firepower is quite strong. You have such strong firepower, but you don't know how to throw smoke bombs? If you can't stand it, just let it go. Why are you just blindly fighting like this? What did I teach you before? Li Bang scratched his head and said subconsciously, the situation is different. Smoke bombs were also thrown. The main thing is that you said you wanted to kill them all, but you also said not to pursue them too deeply, so I just had to go ahead with it. Chen Chen was speechless. Indeed, the marksmanship of Bao Qi and Li Bang was definitely not up to his level. If he wanted to complete the harvest, he had to get closer and take risks. This is a smart strategic choice. But the question is it necessary for him to be so obedient? I just said to try to knock it out. I didn't say it must be knocked out. Really, this kid's obedience training may be a bit too much. It seems that after this is over, it's time to give him some advanced training like Bao Qi. There were corpses everywhere in the no man's land, and the scene was quite tragic, but Chen Chen's heart was not moved at all. There are many novels or film and television works that like to describe the battle process in great detail, such as how they cheer each other up before the battle, how they speak heroic words, how they kill the enemy, how the enemy's blood spurts out, what the psychological activities of the participants are, and so on. This is a common artistic processing technique, and it is certainly not wrong, but it is the picture that appears when you look at the entire battle from a god's perspective. In real battles, as long as it is not a large-scale positional battle or tug-of-war, most of the time, the real confrontation takes place in a flash. All strategies and tactics have been arranged long ago, and all skills have been mastered long ago. Once you're on the battlefield and the first gunshot is heard, everything is like a wheel rolling forward and no additional power is needed. Those who participate in the battle only really do one thing: knock down the enemy. Whether using guns, cannons, or grenades, the methods are different, but the results are exactly the same. And this is actually what the Dongfeng Corps did. Under Chen Chen's deployment, the first encounter ended at an alarmingly fast speed. On the one hand, this was of course because the enemy was so unprofessional that they did not even set up a fire reconnaissance team that advanced far enough. On the other hand, it was because the equipment of the Dongfeng Corps was indeed incredibly powerful. They have night vision goggles, bulletproof vests, medium, long and short range firepower, machine guns, rifles and shotguns, and they also take advantage of the terrain and set traps in advance. In addition, with the presence of Chen Chen, an extremely accurate shooter who is almost extremely rare in northern Myanmar, it is not surprising that the battle is one-sided. Even if Chen Chen were to beat himself, he would still have to think hard. Perhaps the only tactical solution is to first send a fire reconnaissance team to determine the position of the defenders, then use a large number of torches to interfere with the opponent's thermal imaging, then deploy a formation to encircle the opponent, suppress from multiple directions, and then slowly advance with the help of cover. But of course, it's too late to say anything now. Ga Yaozi's vanguard has indeed been completely wiped out. The next thing to do is to clean up the battlefield. Then take a good rest and prepare well to deal with the attack from the real strong enemy, the Lion Legion. According to Lin He, the Lion Corps is divided into several different teams with unknown speed and location. But no matter where they are, they can't be left too far behind. After this gunfight, they should quickly come over following the sound of the gunfire and try to intercept. For such an enemy, a head-on battle is not advisable. One must either rely on speed and concealment to break through, or intercept and retreat in sections. It was another difficult decision, but it did not affect the 6-member team's quick evacuation. But before leaving, Chen Chen had one more thing he had to do. Revenge for Lin He. He walked up to Lin He, who was still looking at Jia. The wooden stick in the latter's hand had obviously been used before, but he did not aim at the head. Jia did not faint again, but looked at Lin He in a daze with fear and confusion. I'm sorry, but this is also an extraordinary measure. I was worried that you would run around on the battlefield, so I asked Lin He to watch you. Chen Chen spoke. Jia's eyes widened in surprise. You call this watching? The so-called watching means I just want to find a better cover to hide. And he comes up and hits me with a stick? The two of them couldn't understand each other's language, and the only communication was their own screams and the other's ruthless swinging of the stick. In these short 10 minutes, my fear of the stick even outweighed my fear of the gunshots and explosions. But I was still alive, wasn't I? Jia suddenly understood Chen Chen's violent methods. If I had really been smart and looked for shelter at that time, I would probably be in a more dangerous situation. Her eyes changed. The man in front of her might indeed be rude and cruel, but he was also absolutely extremely calm, extremely confident, and extremely powerful. He can really save his own life. Perhaps trusting him unconditionally is your best choice. Thinking of this, Jia let out a long breath and replied, I understand. It's okay. Chen Chen was somewhat surprised at the other party's rapid change, but he was too lazy to think about it. He nodded slightly and turned to Lin He and said, Well, are you ready? Lin He nodded without hesitation and said a classic line that Chen Chen could never have imagined. I'm always ready. Very spirited, but change the lines next time. Chen Chen patted Lin He's shoulder and continued, Load your guns, stand behind us, and come out after you're sure there's no danger. I know, you have bulletproof vests. Lin He nodded somewhat obediently, then clumsily loaded the gun and carefully held it in his hand with the muzzle facing downward. Number 2, give him some rifle bullets and fill up the magazine. Number 3, confirm again if there are any living people who haven't been shot again. Receive. Got it? Just confirmed. The special target is behind the cover. The others are all blue. Some of them are invisible from my position. I can only move forward to make up for the damage. But the problem should not be serious. There should be very few people who survived being shot. Then let's go number 1 and number 2. Go and bring the person back. At Chen Chen's command, Li Bang and Bao Qi moved forward quickly. Under the double cover of Chen Chen and Shi Dakai, it only took them a few minutes to successfully bring the people back while reloading their guns. The man was terrified. He saw with his own eyes his comrades falling one by one and being shot to death one by cold-blooded bullets. Even the brains of a comrade who was pretending to be dead beside him flew onto his face. But for some reason, those people didn't kill me. Is it because I hit it well? Not really. He had only chosen a relatively thick tree, and he was sure that he had accidentally exposed his head several times. It was not until he was caught that he realized that he was going to be kept alive. Can survive. He could hardly hold back his tears. He made up his mind that no matter what the other party asked, he would fully cooperate, and he would do anything as long as he didn't die. However, this idea disappeared in an instant when he reached the campfire. He saw the person standing behind the other person, that face. Lin River, I'm sorry. I'm Soda. I didn't mean to kill your parents. I didn't know it would be like that. I really didn't mean it. I just did something wrong, but I really know it was wrong. I wanted to live too. It was hard for everyone back then. I thought you guys could make it through it. I didn't mean to kill you. I never meant to kill you, did I? Please, let me go. Let me go. I'll work like a slave for you. Please don't kill me. I still have children. I still have a mother. Please. Chen Chen signaled Bao Qi to kick the man down, and he turned his head away. He wasn't going to get involved in this. Maybe it's really like what the man said. He really was just trying to take advantage of a small opportunity and didn't intend to kill anyone. He may not have considered the serious consequences that his minor evil deed might cause, and he may feel guilty and blame himself. In fact, he might have really needed the wild boar at that time, otherwise he and his family would have died. This is an unsolvable contradiction and an unsolvable hatred. The sad thing is that this land is full of such unsolvable problems. The abbot of Minglang Zen Temple once said that everyone here is killing people, just using different methods. This statement is absolutely true. But to kill or not to kill, this will be Lin He's own choice.